Tonight, we journey back to the sun-scorched, sea-breeze-kissed cradle of Western civilization, ancient Greece. A realm of myth and marble, where titans of thought like Plato walked, democratic ideals first took root, and gods were worshipped in golden temples. Indeed, it's a world we often envision through the pristine, pantless perfection of its sculptures, embodying grace and philosophical serenity. But let's strip away the romanticized myths for a moment, past the heroic tales of Sparta and the intellectual gravitas of Athens. Beneath that glorious veneer lies a brutal, unvarnished reality. For while ancient Greece undeniably bequeathed us the very foundations of philosophy, democracy, and art, it also offered its average citizen a daily existence so relentlessly harsh, you would, quite frankly, struggle to survive it in our modern age. So, before you settle into this journey through time, take a deep breath. If you genuinely appreciate the paths we explore together, a quick like and a subscription would be an honor. And please, tell me in the comments where you're joining us from, and what hour it is in your corner of the globe. Your presence from across the world always adds a fascinating dimension to our shared exploration. Now, let the modern world fade. Dim the lights, perhaps turn on a fan, allowing its gentle hum to be your sole companion as we ease into tonight's visceral journey. Close your eyes and imagine waking not to the gentle beep of an alarm, but to the relentless, burgeoning heat of the Aegean sun, already transforming your meager dwelling into a suffocating, slow-cooking oven. This is your home in ancient Greece, a modest, single-room box, crudely fashioned from sun-baked mud bricks or unhewn rough stone. Its few, small windows are gaping holes without glass, shielded only by wooden shutters, not for privacy, but to deter stray goats, perhaps, or to invite a whisper of breeze, should the capricious gods feel generous. There is no insulation to buffer the extremes, no ceiling fan to stir the stagnant air, and the very concept of personal space is an alien luxury, unless you consider the sliver of floor where the family goat has not chosen to sprawl. You don't rise with the admirable discipline of a stoic philosopher. You're forced awake. By the first blush of dawn, the air is already thick and heavy, and staying horizontal is an exercise in futility. In the unforgiving summer, your crude stone walls, having absorbed the brutal sun's energy all day, now relentlessly radiate that stored heat back into your bones, turning your sleep into a restless, sweat-drenched ordeal. Yet, come winter, these same walls transform into an icy tomb, each breath a plume of white, and you huddle, wrapped in a thin, scratchy sheet, praying you don't awaken as a literal statue of frostbite. Your bed? A meager, thin mat or a rustling, straw-stuffed mattress, offering little comfort from the hard, cold earth. A rolled-up cloak or the crook of your arm serves as a pillow, offering fleeting support. And as for companionship, you're never truly alone. If you were exceptionally fortunate, the relentless horde of lice, fleas, and bedbugs might have granted you a temporary truce last night. But in all likelihood, they did not. Running water is a concept as fantastical as a chariot that flies. Your morning ablutions begin not with a turn of a faucet, but with a weary trek, either to the bustling, communal public fountain, already swarming with fellow early risers, or, if you dwell in the countryside, to a distant, often stagnant well. There, you embark on the daily, back-breaking ritual of hauling heavy clay amphorae, brimming with precious water, balanced precariously on your shoulders. Each step is a silent prayer against a misplaced stone, a sudden slip, the catastrophic shattering of a week's worth of effort, and a fresh wave of agony for your already protesting back. Cleanliness, as we understand it, is a distant dream. A proper bath is an evening luxury, if it happens at all. Instead, your refreshment involves a meager splash of cold water on your face, a perfunctory rub of olive oil into your sweat-filmed skin, not to moisturize, but to loosen the grime, followed by the scraping action of a strigil, a curved bronze blade. Imagine a spa day devoid of actual spa, actual day, or any genuinely refreshing effect. And forget privacy. That's a concept that simply doesn't exist. Your entire family unit occupies this single, cramped room. You sleep, eat, and often argue, usually about who dragged more mud from the street, within inches of each other. Because the street itself is an extension of your home, your grand hallway, your unfiltered news feed, and, quite often, your communal trash heap. You haven't even tasted your first bite of the day, and already your back aches with a dull throb, sweat trickles down your temples, and your coarse tunic clings to your skin in uncomfortable, impossible places. This, you realize with a sinking heart, is the best part of your day. You've somehow endured the sweatbox of your Greek sleeping quarters, navigated the morning's arduous rituals, and now, finally, it's time to refuel, yes? To nourish the body for the brutal day ahead. Welcome, then, to breakfast in ancient Greece, a culinary experience so profoundly minimal, it renders modern intermittent fasting regimes a feast of gluttonous excess. Your inaugural bite of the day is universally the same, a slab of barley bread, known as maza. It is perpetually stale, dense to the point of jaw-aching effort, and possesses the culinary excitement of the very dirt clods it was likely baked upon. This humble sustenance is born from coarsely ground barley, mixed with water, formed into flat, unforgiving cakes, and then baked either directly on searing hot stones or haphazardly buried in the lingering ashes of last night's meager fire. Imagine the most utilitarian, joyless granola bar you can conceive, then strip it of all sweetness, all texture, and every last vestige of pleasure. That is your maza. To wash down this caloric brick, you might dunk it into a cup of Kikian, essentially watered-down wine. The surprise? The pristine, clear water you envision from the public fountain is often teeming with unseen dangers. With no filtration systems, no knowledge of boiling for sanitation, and certainly no modern Brita pitcher in your humble clay pantry, drinking pure water is a risky gamble. So, Kikian becomes the universal beverage. From the youngest child to the oldest elder, everyone drinks this diluted blend, not for the nascent buzz of alcohol, but purely for hydration and survival. If you belong to the fortunate elite, perhaps your meager maza would be accompanied by a plump fig or two, a handful of briny olives, or a precious smudge of pungent goat cheese. But let's be brutally honest, you are not wealthy. You are among the vast majority, and you count yourself lucky if your barley bread isn't actively crawling with the remnants of yesterday's flies, or if its rock-hard consistency doesn't threaten to chip or crack one of your already fragile teeth with every laborious bite. Forget the comforting aroma of roasted coffee, the protein-rich promise of eggs, a vibrant bowl of fresh fruit, or the golden sweetness of honey. Unless you happen to live adjacent to a particularly generous beekeeper whom you knew how to sufficiently bribe. These are luxuries far beyond your grasp, and don't even conceive of sitting down for a leisurely, relaxing meal. Breakfast is a rapid, utilitarian affair, swallowed standing up or squatting. There are no chairs, no forks, indeed, no cutlery beyond your own fingers, and certainly no concept of mindful eating. You simply chew, swallow, offer a silent, weary nod, and immediately pivot back to the demands of your day. Oh, and if you are a woman in this society, your meal comes with an additional layer of social exclusion. In most households, especially in Athens, women and children are relegated to eating separately, often only after the men of the family have concluded their own meager repast. So, not only is your food undeniably unappetizing, but you also endure the indignity of waiting your turn to be disappointed by it. The bitter irony is palpable. These are the same ancient Greeks who perfected the sophisticated symposium, who elevated banquets into art forms, and who composed poetic odes to the joys of wine and communal feasting. Yet breakfast, that most fundamental of meals, it is deemed utterly beneath a single line of verse. It remains a purely utilitarian, dry, often literally burnt, and profoundly uninspiring ritual. And yet, you masticate through it like a champion, each laborious bite a testament to survival. For this, and this alone, is the sole barrier between you and a relentless day of scorching sun, back-breaking labor, and the incessant, often abstract, debates of your local philosophers. Bon appetit, indeed. Just try not to lose a mole. Having successfully choked down your stale barley brick and a meager splash of wine water, the next ritual of your day unfolds. It's time to freshen up. Or, more accurately, to fail spectacularly at doing so. For in ancient Greece, the concept of hygiene was less about genuine cleanliness and more about deeply ingrained ritual, the symbolic application of oil, and a stoic endurance of discomfort. Soap, as we know it, is a magical fantasy centuries from invention. Your morning bath typically involves the bracing shock of pouring cold water over your body at the bustling public fountain, or from a basic basin in a communal courtyard. Unless you are among the exceedingly fortunate few who reside near a rare public bathhouse, a luxury most will never experience. There is no comforting shampoo, no invigorating minty body wash, and no soft sponge, unless, perhaps, you've managed to pilfer one from a brave sponge diver returning from the Aegean depths. Instead, your primary tool for cleansing is olive oil. Yes, the very same oil you might use for cooking or lamps. You rub this viscous liquid liberally into your skin, not for its moisturizing properties, but as a rudimentary solvent designed to bind with the accumulated dirt, sweat, and general grubbiness of your existence. Then, with a curved bronze blade called a strigil, you methodically scrape off this oily emulsion, leaving you feeling marginally less greasy, perhaps, but still distinctly questionable to any modern sensibility. Imagine, if you will, dousing yourself in a robust salad dressing, then attempting to shave it off with a blunt instrument. This is your daily skincare routine. And if this image conjures any fleeting sense of ancient glamour, remember that this ritual is performed by everyone, often in communal settings, in various states of undress, and usually accompanied by the boisterous sounds of a shared struggle for minimal cleanliness. In ancient Greece, hygiene is a surprisingly social affair. Privacy, emphatically, is not. Now, let's turn our attention to dental care, or the severe lack thereof. There are no toothbrushes, no fluoride-infused toothpaste. At best, if you possess a degree of fancy, you might rub your gums with a pinch of crushed charcoal or rinse your mouth with a splash of vinegar. More often, you simply chew on a rough twig, relying more on divine mercy than any semblance of routine care to preserve your aching molars. Unsurprisingly, body odor is not merely common, it is ubiquitous. Deodorant is an unimaginable future luxury. Perfumes, however, do exist for the privileged few. So, if you happen to be one of the fortunate, you might dab a precious drop of myrrh or rose oil onto your neck. A fleeting, fragrant prayer, right before embarking on a 5-mile trek through the relentless, dust-choked Athenian heat, clad only in flimsy sandals. The inevitable result is a uniquely Greek olfactory signature, a potent blend of unwashed musk, omnipresent dust, and the underlying scent of sheer human desperation. Laundry, consequently, is a rare and arduous event. Your precious few garments are washed by being relentlessly beaten against rough stones in a nearby river or communal trough. If you are counted among the poor, your tunic, likely your only one, has probably not seen fresh water since the revelries of the last festival season, months, or even a year ago. In sum, hygiene in ancient Greece is not concerned with the niceties of smelling or looking good. It is a grim, daily struggle to appear, perhaps, moderately less revolting than you did yesterday. The oil and scrape method offers a fleeting, superficial improvement, but its efficacy is severely limited when you are constantly sweating in a coarse tunic beneath a sun that feels perpetually intent on baking you alive. So yes, from this world sprung the monumental gifts of democracy, profound philosophy, and breathtaking architecture. But a truly decent, cleansing shower? That would have to wait for millennia. Now that you've meticulously oil-scraped your way into the burgeoning new day, it's time for the next ritual, getting dressed. And spoiler alert, your ancient Greek wardrobe is, at best, shockingly minimal, and at worst, comically impractical for a life of constant physical activity. Your sartorial choices are starkly limited, primarily to two options, the chiton or the himation. Both are, in essence, nothing more than oversized rectangles of linen or wool fabric. These are not tailored garments. They are not fitted. Instead, you artfully or clumsily wrap them around your body, securing them with a brooch or fibula at the shoulder and perhaps cinching them with a belt at the waist. It's a design utterly devoid of the concept of windproof. A single, ill-timed gust of wind can, and often does, transform your dignified drapery into an embarrassing public spectacle, suddenly putting your entire philosophical outlook, and much more, on unintentional display. Underwear? That's a modern invention, a concept entirely alien to your world. Bras, too, are non-existent. So unless you are a famously robust Spartan woman, trained from girlhood to sprint and wrestle in skimpy attire, your daily existence is often a precarious gamble, a silent prayer that your pins hold steadfastly, and that no one pays too much attention to your flowing drapery shifting like a poorly hung curtain. Now, let's address your feet. If fortune has smiled upon you, you might possess a simple pair of leather sandals, thin soles, basic straps. More likely, you're barefoot. And barefoot, in ancient Greece, means an entire day spent treading upon scorching sun-baked stone, through goat-trodden dirt paths, and over the organic medley of whatever debris the local market has mashed and squashed into the unpaved roads. Imagine attempting to stroll across a searing hot skillet in the peak of July, all while trying to avoid fresh donkey dung and discarded fruit peels. That, in essence, is your daily commute. And as for sun protection, it's a non-starter. There are no wide-brimmed hats, unless you are a farmer or a sailor, whose practical needs override social custom. Sunscreen, of course, is the stuff of unthinkable future magic, as you are living in 450 BCE and the foundational concepts of modern chemistry and dermatology have yet to be conceived. The Aegean sun, a relentless, unforgiving force, cares not one whit for your intellectual pursuits or your philosophical ponderings. It will roast you with impartial efficiency. By the oppressive peak of noon, your exposed shoulders are a painful, fiery red. Your feet are encrusted with layers of filth, and your linen robe clings to you in a dozen places that defy all laws of geometry and comfort. And remember, public nudity, particularly for men, is not considered shocking in Greek society. It's a commonplace sight. You might casually pass athletes training vigorously in the gymnasium, entirely in the buff, or even prominent politicians delivering impassioned speeches in tunics so loosely draped they seem poised to unravel at any moment. Now, if you happen to be among the privileged elite, your chiton or himation might boast a luxurious dye, perhaps a soft, regal purple or a vibrant saffron yellow, signaling your status. But for the vast majority, the everyday uniform consists of undyed off-white or muted brown. Dyes are prohibitively expensive, and no one, after all, would waste precious color on the man whose days are spent laboriously mending fishing nets for a living. So, you navigate your long, arduous day, effectively dressed like a sun-scorched, sweaty toga burrito, constantly aware of the uncomfortable dampness of your tunic and silently, desperately hoping that a crucial pin doesn't decide to pop loose in front of the solemn priestess or a passing magistrate. And here's the truly demoralizing kicker. You're not even halfway through your ceaseless daily chores. Welcome to ancient Greece, a world where military service transcends mere employment. It is your inherent civic duty, your most fundamental social expectation, and all too often, your swift, irreversible one-way ticket to an early grave. If you are born a free male citizen, particularly within the fiercely militaristic societies of Athens or Sparta, consider yourself immediately enrolled. Congratulations, or perhaps condolences. You are, by birthright and societal decree, a soldier. Like it or not, your destiny is intertwined with the phalanx. By your early teens, you are already gripping heavy wooden weapons, your shoulders aching from the repetitive drills of the phalanx formation. This legendary Greek battle strategy, a formidable wall of shields and spears, relies entirely on absolute cohesion, standing shoulder to shoulder, a living, breathing blockade, desperately hoping the man next to you doesn't falter or trip, shattering the line. In Sparta, the path to soldiery is forged in raw brutality. Boys begin their relentless military training at the tender age of 7, plunged into the infamous Agoge system. This state-sponsored crucible systematically strips away childhood, transforming boys into hardened warriors through calculated starvation, ritualized whipping, and profound isolation, until only the most resilient, or the most broken, survive. In Athens, the regimen is admittedly gentler, but no less mandatory. 2 years of intensive military training dominate your late teens, followed by decades of being perpetually on call, ready to defend the polis at a moment's notice. There's no opting out, no declaration of "I'm more of a thinker." Even revered philosophers like Socrates, whose names now echo through history, actively served in wars, confronting enemies not with witty comebacks, but with very real, very sharp weapons. And indeed, there is always a war. Whether it's the perennial, bitter rivalries of Sparta versus Athens, the existential threat of Athens against the vast Persian Empire, Sparta against virtually every other city-state, or simply a neighboring polis expressing a sudden, aggressive sassiness about trade routes, conflict is not an anomaly. It is the very rhythm of life. Peace, in this age, is merely the fleeting, anxious pause between two inevitable invasions. As for armor, it is a privilege, not a guarantee. If your family can afford the considerable expense, you might be equipped with a gleaming bronze helmet, a sturdy breastplate, protective greaves for your shins, a heavy, round hoplon shield, and a formidable spear. This panoply is your mobile fortress. If you cannot afford such vital protection, then your strategy is simple. Try desperately not to be in the front row. For raw leather and woven cloth, as you will quickly learn, offer scant defense against a volley of arrows or the thrust of a bronze spear. The most infuriating aspect? You are entirely responsible for supplying your own gear. That's right. Being a citizen soldier in ancient Greece is very much a bring-your-own-bronze scenario. Poorer citizens are left to beg, borrow, or fight lightly armed, which, in the brutal lexicon of ancient Greek warfare, is merely a euphemism for more likely to die first, painfully and swiftly. And when you are not actively engaged in the bloody chaos of battle, your life remains utterly consumed by military obligations. You are perpetually preparing, relentlessly training, meticulously cleaning and sharpening your precious weapons, arguing passionately, and often futilely, in the assembly about strategic imperatives, or, for those serving in the powerful navies, laboriously rowing massive triremes for hours on end. For, yes, those formidable warships, the pride of the Aegean, do not propel themselves across the waves. Upon your return, there is no concept of veterans' health care, no comforting pension for your years of service, no psychological therapy for the horrors you've witnessed. There are only the indelible scars etched onto your body, the permanent limp you've acquired, and perhaps, if you were deemed worthy, a crudely carved gravestone offering a brief, impersonal praise of your virtue and courage. A lifetime of sacrifice for little more than a memory. If you found the existence of a free male in ancient Greece to be a relentless gauntlet, brace yourself. Because if you were born a woman, your life was a cage crafted from societal expectation and legal disenfranchisement. In most Greek city-states, and particularly within the supposedly enlightened realm of Athens, women possessed fewer rights than the decorative urns adorning a wealthy man's home. You were forbidden from voting, from holding any public office, from outright owning land, and you rarely, if ever, appeared in public without the watchful presence of a male escort, a father, husband, or brother. Indeed, if your face became too familiar on the streets, whispers would invariably begin, questioning your virtue, branding you as a hetaira, a courtesan, or, in some circles, even worse, a Spartan. Let's begin with your dawn-to-dusk daily routine. You awaken well before the sun crests the horizon, immediately plunging into an endless cycle of chores. You spin raw wool into thread, weave that thread into cloth for garments, laboriously grind grain into flour, painstakingly fetch heavy jars of water, bake the day's coarse bread, manage the household slaves if your family is fortunate enough to possess any, and ceaselessly raise the children. You are, effectively, the unpaid CEO of the household, a figure burdened with immense responsibility but granted none of the pay, respect, or even the briefest respite of a day off. Your social life, consequently, is almost entirely non-existent. You do not attend the captivating plays in the Dionysian theater. You certainly do not join the lively philosophical debates that electrify the agora. The gymnasium, with its athletic contests and intellectual discourse, is exclusively the domain of naked men. Your world is largely confined to the gymnasium, the designated women's quarters, and your sole contact with the vibrant, bustling outside world comes in the form of fleeting, filtered glimpses through the intricate latticework of your windows. As for education, if you are exceptionally lucky, you might be taught to read a few basic lines, but your primary curriculum is a relentless apprenticeship in domestic duties. Philosophy, rhetoric, geometry, the intellectual pursuits that shape the minds of men, are entirely for the boys. Your singular purpose, your life's prescribed trajectory, is to marry well, to produce healthy sons, and to remain utterly invisible while accomplishing these tasks. Marriage, far from a union of affection, is a starkly transactional affair. It occurs alarmingly young, often in your early teens, to a man twice your age, a union meticulously arranged by your father, who views you less as a person and more as a strategic trade agreement. Love is an optional, often absent, component. Dowries, however, are absolutely mandatory. And once you begin bearing children, your entire value, your very essence, becomes inextricably linked to the functionality of your womb. Now, a significant caveat must be made for Sparta. Spartan women were famously, indeed uniquely, more liberated than their Athenian counterparts. They received an education, exercised publicly, even in competition, and notably, could own and manage property. But before you allow envy to take root, understand that this relative freedom was born directly from the state's all-consuming obsession with warfare and a brutal eugenics program. Your paramount duty as a Spartan woman was not merely to bear children, but to produce strong, healthy warriors for the state. Failure to do so brought profound disgrace. And should your husband fall in battle, you could not inherit significant wealth, nor could you remarry without explicit state permission. Your options, already narrow, would shrink even faster than your limited social circle. You would find yourself legally, socially, and often physically, utterly confined. So yes, the ancient Greeks worshipped powerful, independent goddesses like Athena, Artemis, and Hera. But for flesh and blood women, they were expected to remain quiet, diligently tending the home, and, above all, to remain strictly out of sight. Ancient Athens, rightly, stands hailed in history as the birthplace of democracy, a revolutionary concept that promised self-governance. And yes, technically, that claim holds true. But before you allow that stirring notion to spark too much excitement, let us be unequivocally clear. The vast majority of you, my modern listeners, would not have qualified to participate in this groundbreaking political experiment. An astonishing fact, the overwhelming bulk of people residing within Athens, well over 90% of the population, were systematically and entirely excluded from the democratic process. To cast a vote in the Athenian ecclesia, the assembly where laws were forged and destiny decided, you had to be a freeborn male, born of Athenian parents, and a citizen over the age of 18. This stringent criteria immediately disenfranchised women, resident foreigners known as medics, who often paid taxes and served in the military, the vast population of slaves, and, of course, all children. None of these groups possessed any political voice whatsoever. This, then, was not democracy for the people. This was democracy for a highly exclusive, self-selecting club of sunburned men in sandals. If, by some stroke of ancestral fortune, you did meet these demanding criteria, your civic duty extended far beyond merely casting a vote. You were expected to participate, and participate constantly, in the vibrant, often raucous, life of the polis. Laws were meticulously proposed, furiously debated, and ultimately passed within immense assemblies numbering thousands of citizens. There were no career politicians as we understand them. Instead, every eligible man was expected to be part legislator, part jury member, and an often boisterously overconfident amateur in all matters of statecraft. Further still, through an astonishing lottery system, you could be randomly chosen by lot to serve in incredibly powerful positions, overseeing the state treasury, for instance, or deliberating on a capital murder trial as part of a large jury. This sounds thrillingly egalitarian, until you recall the crucial detail. There were precisely 0 qualifications for these roles. Your local fishmonger, whose primary expertise lies in the freshness of sardines, might find himself overseeing complex military logistics one day. And your charming, yet slightly deluded uncle, who still firmly believes in the existence of sea monsters, might very well be judging a murder trial the next. Such was the unpredictable majesty of Athenian direct democracy. And if any individual became too powerful, too popular, or simply managed to annoy enough of his fellow citizens in the wrong way, there was the unique democratic mechanism of ostracism. Once a year, citizens could convene and, on a broken piece of pottery, an ostracan scratch the name of a person they wished to see exiled. A sufficient number of these votes meant immediate banishment from Athens for a full 10 years. No trial, no defense, no appeal. Simply go away. You're becoming a bit too prominent for our comfort. And yet, despite these significant, indeed glaring, flaws, Athenian democracy was undeniably revolutionary. It boldly granted a political voice to ordinary men. Well, to some ordinary men, and irrevocably laid the philosophical and practical groundwork for countless future political systems. But let there be no mistake, it was neither fair nor inclusive. If you were a woman, your voice was silenced. If you were a foreign-born resident, even one who contributed taxes and served the city, you were silenced. If you were a slave, toiling away building the magnificent Parthenon, you were most certainly silenced. And if you were a philosopher who dared to ask too many inconvenient questions, you might find yourself not just silenced, but possibly executed. Democracy was indeed born in ancient Greece. But if you had arrived expecting modern concepts of equal rights and inclusive politics, you would have been summarily escorted from the assembly and, quite possibly, told to bring your own ostracan. In ancient Greece, slavery was not merely an accepted institution, it was an utterly ingrained expectation. Even the most modest households, far from wealthy, typically possessed at least one slave. This wasn't a mark of opulence, but a reflection of how deeply slavery was woven into the very fabric of society, rendering it as commonplace and unquestioned as wearing sandals or enduring a sunburn. The radical notion that one might not own another human being was practically unthinkable. Crucially, slaves were not identified by a specific race or ethnicity. They were drawn from a vast and brutal pool, vanquished peoples from conquered lands, Thracians, Scythians, Syrians, and even fellow Greeks from the wrong city-state caught at the wrong time. Some were born into generational bondage, others were tragic prisoners of war, and a grim number were simply kidnapped and sold into servitude. It was a thriving, brutal market, one where business, tragically, was always good. If you resided in Athens, your slave was the silent, indispensable engine of your daily life. They likely performed every conceivable chore, cooking your meager meals, painstakingly fetching your daily water, cleaning your modest home, nurturing and caring for your children, carrying your market purchases, and standing motionless, an invisible presence, during your dinner. Some highly skilled slaves even managed complex business affairs or oversaw entire households, freeing their citizen owners to lounge in comfortable leisure at a symposium, sipping diluted wine, and engaging in elevated debates about abstract concepts like justice and freedom. The level of crushing irony here reaches its absolute maximum. In the infamous silver mines of Lorient, however, the reality of slavery plunged to its darkest depths. Here, countless slaves, including young children, toiled in utterly horrifying conditions, crawling through claustrophobic, narrow shafts in absolute darkness, their lungs slowly destroyed by toxic dust. They died, excruciatingly and slowly, all for the sake of the silver coins that fueled Athens' economy and its vaunted civic pride. Even those fortunate enough to be educated, serving as esteemed teachers of grammar and mathematics, as meticulous scribes, or even managing sophisticated bank accounts for their masters, were never more than property. Make no mistake, regardless of their skills or intellect, they remained entirely at the mercy of their owners. They could be brutally beaten, branded, sold like cattle, or even killed on a whim, possessing absolutely no legal rights or protections under Athenian law. The extremely rare individuals who managed to earn their freedom, known as freedmen, discovered they were never truly free. They remained bound by complex ties of loyalty and obligation to their former masters and were permanently barred from attaining full citizenship. No voting, no land ownership, just the tenuous hope of a marginally less arduous tomorrow. And unlike many later slave systems, there was no widespread abolitionist movement stirring the conscience of the populace. Indeed, even towering intellects like Aristotle, yes, that Aristotle, whose philosophical concepts still shape our world, offered chilling justifications for slavery, asserting it as both natural and necessary. According to his profound wisdom, some people were simply slaves by nature. Enlightening, isn't it? A truly profound insight from the man who gave us logic and ethics. So, while ancient Greece bestowed upon humanity the foundational pillars of ethics, democracy, and profound philosophy, it is a truth we must confront. Every single one of these magnificent achievements was constructed, literally and figuratively, on the broken backs of people who were never permitted to speak, never allowed to vote, and never allowed to truly matter. This is not a mere footnote in history. It is the fundamental, often ignored foundation upon which their glorious civilization stood. Feeling unwell in ancient Greece, that is, quite frankly, a deeply unfortunate predicament. Because unless you happen to reside next door to Hippocrates himself, a statistical improbability of epic proportions, your comprehensive healthcare plan largely consists of vague, often contradictory herbal concoctions, desperate pleas for divine intervention, and an overwhelming quantity of wishful thinking. Let's begin with the bare basics. Hospitals, as we understand modern medical facilities, simply do not exist. If illness or injury befalls you, your only recourse is to remain confined to your home. Perhaps a kindly, well-meaning neighbor possesses some inherited knowledge of poultices and ancient folk remedies. Perhaps an elderly relative vaguely remembers a specific prayer to Asclepius, the revered god of healing. Or perhaps your local temple, dedicated to Asclepius, offers the unsettling opportunity to pet a sacred, non-venomous snake for some nebulous spiritual comfort. And truly, that is about the extent of your medical options. The most renowned Greek doctors were, in truth, an eclectic mix of intuitive herbalists, speculative philosophers, and outright gamblers. Their medical paradigm was rooted in the theory of the four humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. According to this pervasive belief, any illness was the direct result of an imbalance in these vital bodily fluids. So, if you presented with a raging fever, the diagnosis was invariably too much blood, and the prescription, a dramatic, often dangerous, bloodletting. Persistent coughing? Clearly excess phlegm, necessitating an uncomfortable period of fasting. Melancholy or depression? That's obviously black bile, perhaps curable by a brisk walk or a prolonged, dramatic stare at the vast, indifferent sea. Most treatments were a dubious cocktail of trial, error, and liberal applications of garlic. You might be administered crushed poppy seeds, a potent narcotic, so good luck with that particular remedy. Other options included boiled figs or a pungent compress crafted from vinegar and, well, something someone had scraped off a goat. Did these methods ever work? Occasionally, perhaps, by sheer coincidence or the placebo effect. Did they hurt? Almost invariably. Surgery was a last, desperate resort, rare, excruciatingly terrifying, and nearly always fatal. Without the blessings of anesthesia or antisepsis, even the simplest incision carried the horrifying risk of sepsis and a slow, agonizing death. The surgeon's toolkit comprised crude iron knives, rudimentary bone saws, and, most crucially, prayers. Many, many prayers. Should you require an amputation, your only hope was to clench a leather strap between your teeth, bracing for unimaginable pain. Childbirth, attended by midwives, was a perilous journey even on the most auspicious days. Mortality rates for both women and infants were tragically, horrifyingly high. One difficult birth, one stubbornly stuck shoulder, one breech presentation, and that was often the swift, brutal end for both mother and child. If you belonged to the privileged few, you might afford to summon a traveling physician, an individual who possessed an actual medical scroll, perhaps, and a collection of fancy, aromatic oils. But if you were poor, your medical fate rested entirely on local folk knowledge, dubious street remedies, and your own sheer, desperate resilience. Or, far more frequently, you simply didn't recover. You faded. Still, it's worth noting that they did champion the virtues of rest, clean air, and a balanced diet. So, there's that small, almost negligible comfort. Ancient Greek medicine, for all its terrifying quirks, did indeed bequeath us the foundational Hippocratic Oath, a beacon of medical ethics. But it also offered such gems of treatment as drink boiled cabbage water. So, in summation, healthcare in ancient Greece was predominantly a blend of vague herbs, desperate hope, and a grim determination to simply hang on. In ancient Greece, theater was far more than mere entertainment. It was a profound civic duty, an intricate religious ritual, and at times, a full-contact sport for the very soul of the community. Let's begin, perhaps, with the good part. Attendance was free for all male citizens. A generous offer, assuming, of course, you weren't a woman, a slave, or a foreigner, in which case, good luck getting even a fleeting glimpse of the stage. You would file, shoulder to shoulder, into an enormous, sun-drenched open-air theater, typically carved majestically into a hillside, much like the awe-inspiring Great Theater of Dionysus in Athens. There, nestled amidst thousands of other sweaty, expectant citizens, you would commit to being present all day. Seriously, all day. The famed Dionysia Festival, for instance, unfolded from the first blush of dawn until deep into the night, a relentless succession of back-to-back plays, soul-wrenching tragedies, ribald comedies, and satiric dramas. There were no intermissions, no convenient snack vendors, and absolutely no dedicated bathroom breaks, unless you considered the nearest, strategically located bush on the hillside. Arrive late or dare to disrupt the proceedings with excessive chatter, and you wouldn't merely be frowned upon. You could face a hefty public fine. The performances themselves were nothing short of wild, a raw, visceral spectacle. Tragedies were emotionally gutting, plunging you into narratives of fratricidal murder, divine-induced madness, endless wars, and vengeful gods casually obliterating entire families over a single, ill-fated decision made 3 generations prior. You did not come to the tragedies to laugh. You came to collectively weep, to purge your soul in unison with your fellow citizens. Then came the comedies, which were decidedly not light-hearted family entertainment. These plays mocked, satirized, and often savaged politicians, esteemed philosophers, entire rival city-states, and all manner of bodily functions with a shocking, unbridled precision. Imagine if Saturday Night Live and a particularly vicious college debate team had an unholy love child, then dressed it in a grotesquely exaggerated phallic costume and unleashed it onto the stage. That was Greek comedy. The actors, All male, of course, even for the female roles, donned towering, expressive masks, exaggerated costumes, and platform shoes, creating larger-than-life figures. The chorus, a dynamic ensemble, sang, danced, and often shouted commentary directly to the audience, acting like an ancient Greek version of a live, unmoderated Twitter feed, only considerably louder and clad in flowing tunics. And this was emphatically not passive viewing. The audience was a loud, boisterous, and entirely engaged entity. They booed and hissed with passionate abandon, threw things, from olive pits to fruit, if sufficiently displeased, and often engaged in heated arguments amongst themselves, mid-performance. Theater was, in essence, democracy under stage lights. If a play offended your sensibilities, you let them know, vociferously. If it moved you deeply, you shouted, you wept openly, and perhaps you returned home contemplating a fundamental reevaluation of your very life. At the conclusion of the festival, a specially selected jury cast their votes to determine which playwright would claim the coveted prize. Imagine dedicating 3 emotionally exhausting days to weeping over the profound tragedies of Aeschylus or Sophocles, only to discover that some bawdy comedy featuring a talking pig god has stolen the top honors. That, in a nutshell, is ancient Greece for you. So, yes, in the theater, you were never merely a spectator. You were a dynamic, contributing, and often disruptive participant, possibly with a handful of olives at the ready. You've somehow survived your epic, all-day tragicomic theater binge. Your senses are overloaded, your voice is hoarse from shouting, and you're ready for what's next? Now, disoriented and perhaps a little dazed from your theatrical marathon, you wander into the Agora, the bustling, sun-drenched heart of the city, a vibrant tapestry of commerce, gossip, and civic life. You navigate through vendors hawking wares, citizens debating politics, and the general cacophony, only to quite literally stumble upon a figure, cloaked, barefoot, and with an intense gaze, stopping strangers to inquire, with unwavering earnestness, what is justice? Welcome to philosophy. In ancient Greece, especially in Athens, it wasn't an academic discipline confined to dusty libraries. It was the local, intellectual sport, a relentless mental wrestling match played out in the open air. Its champions, names we now revere as titans of world-changing ideas, Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, were, in their own time, often perceived as eccentric men who talked an awful lot, possessed an uncanny knack for making other people feel profoundly stupid, and couldn't seem to afford proper footwear. Philosophy was everywhere, and it was decidedly not optional. Consider Socrates. This legendary figure meticulously crafted an entire career out of relentlessly asking questions that seemed, on the surface, to lead absolutely nowhere, yet possessed an almost supernatural ability to meticulously dismantle people's cherished confidence in their own opinions. You might be innocently minding your own business in the bustling agora, perhaps haggling over the price of olives or attempting to gently pet a particularly scruffy stray goat, when he would materialize beside you, his gaze piercing. Do you believe in truth, my friend? Yes, I suppose I do. Of course. Indeed. And what, precisely, is truth? Cue 3 hours of intellectual torment and a sudden, fervent desire to abandon the complexities of Athenian life for the stark simplicity of Sparta. Socrates, master of the unwritten word, never sullied parchment with his thoughts. That task fell to his diligent student, Plato. Yet, the philosopher carved an indelible mark on Athens, a legacy cemented, in part, by the fact that the city ultimately executed him for being, shall we say, profoundly inconvenient. Officially, the charges were corrupting the youth and impiety, a polite euphemism for questioning everything the establishment held dear. But let's be utterly frank. He probably just wouldn't stop cross-examining people during dinner. Philosophy in ancient Greece wasn't the genteel, tweed-jacketed academic pursuit we imagine today. It was a raw, visceral, and astonishingly public spectacle, loud, relentlessly confrontational, and weirdly demanding, almost like a mental athletic event. Debates didn't unfold in hushed lecture halls. They erupted spontaneously in the sun-drenched agora, the busy gymnasia, or beneath the shade of the stoas. They were intense intellectual sparring matches, often ending not just in hurt feelings, but in profound, soul-shaking existential crises. There were no microphones, only voices amplified by passion and conviction, hands gesticulating wildly, and enough sheer ego and intellectual bravado to fill the entire Acropolis. And if you thought you could simply observe from a safe distance, a mere spectator to the intellectual gladiatorial combat, you were gravely mistaken. Philosophers delighted in ensnaring random bystanders, dragging them into the arena of ideas. You didn't just walk past Plato's academy. You risked being absorbed into its very fabric, like a fly caught in an intellectual web. Utter one slightly ill-considered remark, express an opinion without sufficient backing, and suddenly you became the day's prime example of an unexamined life, a cautionary tale paraded before your peers. Even children, it seemed, weren't safe from the philosopher's probing gaze. Aristotle, one of history's greatest minds, tutored Alexander the Great, a headstrong teenager who would later conquer half the known world. Imagine your high school civics teacher not just explaining geopolitics, but handing you a literal globe and, with a gravitas that belied the absurdity, intoning, "Go forth and fix this." So, yes, undeniably, ancient Greek philosophy bestowed upon us the foundational principles of logic, ethics, science, and political theory. But living amidst it, in its rawest form, it also promised you a throbbing headache, a dizzying crisis of identity, and a roughly 70% chance of being publicly humiliated by a man in surprisingly simple sandals. So, you've somehow navigated the treacherous intellectual landscape and made it in ancient Athens. You're articulate, quick-witted, politically engaged, perhaps even a rising star. People like you, maybe a little too much. And therein lies your first, critical mistake. Because in Athens, being excessively popular, becoming too influential, could earn you not an award, but a swift, unilateral eviction from the city for a full decade. Not an arrest, not a fine, not a trial, just gone. This wasn't some shadowy conspiracy orchestrated by disgruntled rivals or a backroom deal whispered in the dead of night. No, this was an ingenious, brutal, and perfectly legal mechanism built directly into the very core of the democratic system. It was called ostracism, and it was perfectly public, perfectly terrifying, and perfectly Athenian. Once a year, the free male citizens of Athens would gather, their murmuring voices filling the assembly, to decide whether to even hold an ostracism vote. If a sufficient number agreed that a certain individual posed a potential threat to the delicate balance of their democracy, the process would begin. Each citizen would then take a broken piece of pottery, an ostracon, and scratch onto it the name of the person they wished to see exiled. If any individual garnered 6,000 or more votes, a truly staggering number for the time, they were banished. No appeal, no explanation, no grand pronouncements of guilt or innocence. Just pack your sandals and leave. You didn't have to be a criminal. In fact, the vast majority of those ostracized had committed no discernible crime other than becoming too charismatic, too successful, too something. Perhaps you were a celebrated war hero, a silver-tongued orator who could sway the masses, or simply a man with an impossibly enviable head of hair that instilled undue confidence. Whatever it was, your fellow citizens, in their collective wisdom, decided you were subtly, perhaps inadvertently, becoming a threat to the health of their democracy. And democracy, in its ancient and blunt wisdom, voted to yeet you into temporary oblivion. And here's the truly Athenian twist. It wasn't even permanent. Ostracism lasted precisely 10 years, after which you were free to return as if nothing had happened. Your property remained untouched, your citizenship remained intact, and officially, no grudges were held. It was merely a decade-long, enforced vacation you absolutely did not ask for. Some of Athens' most iconic figures faced this unique form of political timeout. Aristides the Just, for instance, was so universally well-liked, so consistently lauded for his virtue, that one disgruntled citizen allegedly voted against him simply because they were sick of hearing him called the just all the time. Brutal. Even Themistocles, the military genius whose cunning saved Athens at the pivotal Battle of Salamis, eventually got the boot once he became too arrogant, too accustomed to public adulation. It turns out that gratitude, even for saving the city, had a remarkably short expiration date. Ostracism was initially conceived as a safeguard, a democratic bulwark designed to protect Athens from ambitious tyrants. Yet, more often than not, it served as a peculiar punishment for success, a social leveling mechanism. So, if you were ambitious, you had to walk an impossibly fine line. You had to be respected, but never too respected. Popular, certainly, but never so charismatic that you genuinely worried people. Think of it less as a political process and more like a proto-reality show where the ultimate prize for winning too many fans was being unceremoniously exiled to the countryside, with only your dignity and your carefully hoarded olive oil stash for company. Athens gave birth to democracy, yes, but it also, in its own unique way, invented cancel culture 2,500 years ahead of schedule. In ancient Greece, the question wasn't if you were going to die young. It was merely how soon and, more pressingly, how painfully. Life expectancy, even for those fortunate enough to survive childhood, hovered precariously around 30 to 35 years. And making it past infancy was no small feat, a desperate gamble against overwhelming odds. Roughly 1 in 3 children never saw their 5th birthday, thanks to a relentless onslaught of disease, chronically poor nutrition, and the sobering fact that hygiene was, as we've already touched upon, far more of a theoretical concept than an actual daily practice. You could, quite literally, die from anything. A seemingly innocuous scratch that turned septic overnight, a sudden, unexplained fever that would burn through your body, the inherent and terrifying dangers of childbirth, a leading cause of death for women, or something as deceptively simple as drinking from a contaminated cup of water. Medical knowledge was rudimentary at best, a haphazard blend of herbal remedies, crude surgical techniques, and desperate pleas to the gods. And divine intervention, as anyone who lived through those times could attest, was not exactly known for its consistency or reliability. If you resided within the cramped confines of a city, disease spread with horrifying speed and efficiency. Densely packed living quarters, open-air sewers that wound through the streets, and communal fountains where everyone drew their water created perfect breeding grounds for pathogens. The infamous plague of Athens, which ravaged the city during the Peloponnesian War, wiped out a staggering third of its population. The historian Thucydides meticulously chronicled its horrifying trajectory, then contracted it himself, and somehow, miraculously, survived. Most were not so lucky. War, too, was a constant, looming shadow. If you were a man, the odds were depressingly high that you would meet your end clutching a spear on a dusty battlefield or rowing furiously on a trireme, tossed amidst the chaos of a naval engagement. Even if you escaped immediate death in battle, debilitating injuries often turned fatal days or weeks later, in the absence of antibiotics, proper stitches, or even basic antiseptic care, just fervent hope and crude garlic compresses. And then, there was always the terrifying possibility of death by divine tantrum. Displease a god, forget a crucial sacrifice at a hallowed altar, mock a temple statue, even in jest, or perhaps speak ill of Zeus after 3 too many cups of watered-down wine, and you could swiftly find yourself on the very wrong end of a bolt of lightning, a sudden plague, or a completely inexplicable and utterly spontaneous goat stampede. Burial rites were not mere social customs. They were of paramount spiritual importance. If your family lacked the resources to afford a proper funeral, complete with the requisite coins for the ferryman Sharon to guide your soul across the river Styx, and the intricate rituals designed to secure your peaceful spot in the afterlife, your body might be unceremoniously dumped outside the city walls, unmarked and condemned to oblivion. This wasn't merely tragic. It was profoundly dangerous to the soul. The Greeks firmly believed that unburied souls were doomed to wander eternally, lost and tormented, caught in a wretched limbo between worlds. Death, then, was not some distant, poetic abstraction. It was a daily reality, a grim reaper that cared nothing for your philosophical brilliance, your youthful beauty, or your ancient lineage. You could be a slave, a decorated general, or a celebrated poet, and still succumb to a moldy fig or the venomous bite of an angry mosquito. The Greeks boasted a pantheon of 12 Olympian gods, majestic and powerful, yet not a single one of them, it seemed, harbored any particular fondness for humanity. In theory, ancient Greek religion was all about achieving harmony with the divine, offering reverent worship to Zeus, Hera, Athena, Apollo, Artemis, Poseidon, and the rest of the glittering, volatile crew perched atop Mount Olympus. In practice, however, it was a ceaseless, exhausting exercise in spiritual damage control. These were not benevolent, all-loving deities. They were formidable, temperamental drama queens and kings, endowed with godlike superpowers and decidedly human flaws. Forget a sacrifice, even a minor one. Expect your crops to wither and your harvest to fail. Offer the wrong prayer, mispronounce a sacred name, watch your ship sink in a sudden storm. Wander inadvertently into the wrong sacred grove, prepare for a snake bite, a localized plague, or a crippling famine. Take your pick. The divine buffet of suffering was vast. The gods didn't just demand your unwavering loyalty. They demanded perfect timing, absolutely flawless rituals, and unblinking, unquestioning obedience. This wasn't a matter of weekly temple visits. It was a woven tapestry of daily rituals performed at home altars, boisterous seasonal festivals that consumed entire weeks, and solemn civic ceremonies that punctuated the calendar. Before planting crops, you prayed earnestly to Demeter. Going to war? A substantial offering to Ares was mandatory. Traveling by sea? You'd better pour out some precious wine to Poseidon, perhaps even toss in a goat for good measure, just to be on the safe side. Each god maintained a complex, often contradictory ledger of favorites and grudges. Apollo, for instance, might protect your city with divine grace, unless, of course, your great-grandfather had offended him once, in which case your entire lineage might be cursed until further notice. Hera, the august goddess of marriage, paradoxically specialized in making mortal women's lives utterly miserable if Zeus so much as cast a fleeting glance in their direction. Athena, the embodiment of wisdom, was known to reward intellectual prowess, but also, in a casual display of divine power, turned a boastful weaver into a spider. Casual indeed. And if the Olympian titans weren't enough to keep you in a perpetual state of nervous apprehension, the Greek landscape teemed with nymphs, mischievous satyrs, shadowy spirits, unpredictable river gods, and terrifying monsters lurking around every corner. Step on the wrong patch of sacred land, and suddenly your left leg might inexplicably belong to a vengeful woodland sprite. But worst of all, the most soul-crushing aspect was the profound, unsettling uncertainty. You never truly knew why something bad happened. Was it the wrong offering? The incorrect timing of a ritual? Did you, perhaps, unknowingly insult a god in a vivid dream? Or was it actually your bothersome cousin's fault for some forgotten transgression? Maybe it was something your great-grandfather did, a curse handed down through generations. It didn't truly matter. The gods, you were reminded constantly, worked in mysterious and deeply, terrifyingly personal ways. And yet, for all the fear and arbitrary terror they inspired, Greek religion was inextricably woven into every single part of life, from the highest echelons of politics to the intimate miracle of childbirth, from the daily grind of farming to the glorious spectacle of the Olympic Games. You feared the gods, yes, deeply and constantly, but you also depended on them for every breath and every harvest. Their majestic temples were not just places of worship. They were the iconic landmarks of every city. Their vibrant festivals were not mere holidays. They were national celebrations, binding communities together. And their captivating myths explained everything from the crackle of lightning in a summer storm to the intoxicating agony of love. You didn't believe in the gods out of abstract faith. You believed out of a raw, primal instinct for survival. So, after all this, the blistering sun-baked homes, the monotonous barley-bread breakfasts, the sandal-blistered treks across rugged terrain, the constant threat of wars, the ravages of plagues, the capricious whims of the gods, and the occasional, deeply traumatic, goat-related incident. Let's pose the question plainly and without embellishment. Would you last a single day in ancient Greece? Honestly, no. You'd fold before lunch. The unrelenting heat, the Spartan diet, the constant, gnawing threat of war or arbitrary divine punishment would swiftly wipe that Instagrammable, romanticized toga fantasy right off your face. You are simply not accustomed to hauling heavy amphorae of water before breakfast, or squatting over a rudimentary hole in the ground next to a casually grazing temple goat, conducting your morning ablutions. You desperately miss your running water, your easily accessible aspirin for that inevitable headache, and your fundamental right to complain about minor inconveniences without being summarily exiled by a shard of pottery. You might romanticize the idea of living amidst soaring marble statues, engaging with brilliant philosophers, and listening to epic poets recite their verses. But guess what? Those were the rarefied 1% of ancient Greece, the privileged few. For virtually everyone else, life was an unrelenting cycle of backbreaking labor, severely limited rights, and depressingly frequent funerals. Your democracy? Only if you were a freeborn male citizen. Your medicine? A dubious blend of garlic compresses and desperate hope. Your gods? Frequently furious, eternally demanding. Your social media? A particularly impassioned guy yelling about justice in the Agora while vigorously waving a fish he probably just bought. And yet, for all of that, the ancient Greeks didn't just endure, they thrived. They built magnificent temples that still stand defiant against time, wrote profound plays that we still perform and analyze today, debated foundational ideas that we still wrestle with in the modern era, and laid the intricate groundwork for everything from astronomy to ethics, from mathematics to democracy itself. They didn't merely survive hardship. They sculpted an entire civilization while literally sweating through it. No, you wouldn't last. But they did. Not because life was easy or comfortable or devoid of terror, but because they discovered profound ways to forge meaning in a world teeming with chaos. They questioned everything, fought constantly, wrote with exquisite beauty, died tragically young, and still, somehow, irrevocably shaped the modern world in myriad ways. So, no, you probably wouldn't make it past your first sunstroke, or an unexpected goat bite, or that unavoidable, unsolicited philosophy lesson in the middle of the street. But if by some miracle you did make it, if you adapted, if you endured, if you listened closely, you would find yourself standing among some of the most passionate, resilient, and brilliantly flawed people history has ever known. And they wouldn't judge you for struggling. They'd simply hand you a tunic, point towards the formidable slopes of the Amphipolis, and say, with a wry, knowing smile, "Good. Now carry that up a hill." It began with a death, but more profoundly, with a betrayal. Pursuitigus, the respected king of the Iceni tribe, whose lands now lie in what we call Eastern England, had played the Roman game with shrewd calculation for many years. He had walked a perilous tightrope, maintaining his rule as a client king under the ever-present, intimidating shadow of Rome. He enjoyed a fragile peace, a degree of autonomy, and considerable wealth, all contingent upon remaining useful to the burgeoning empire. But when he died, around 60 AD, he left behind a will meticulously crafted to protect his people, to secure their future against the inexorable Roman advance. In a gesture he believed would solidify their safety and sovereignty, he named the Roman emperor as co-heir alongside his two young daughters, hoping this act of loyalty and appeasement would ensure Rome's benevolence. He was catastrophically wrong. Rome did not honor the will. Rome did not negotiate. Rome simply took. Without so much as a moment's hesitation, the Roman authorities unilaterally annexed the entire Iceni kingdom. Their legionaries, cold and efficient, stormed in, claiming everything. The ancestral lands that had sustained the Iceni for generations, their precious livestock, their homes, and all their accumulated treasures. But the brazen theft of wealth and territory, egregious as it was not the worst offense. It was what they did next, an act of calculated brutality that transformed a political insult into a deeply personal, unimaginable hell. They publicly flogged the queen, Boudica, in full view of her traumatized people. This wasn't merely to humiliate her. It was a chilling, explicit message delivered with every crack of the whip. Asterisk, you are nothing. Your power is an illusion. We own you. Asterisk, and if that wasn't enough to crush the spirit, they then violated her young daughters, her precious children, directly in front of their mother's eyes. This was not simply a crackdown, nor a swift suppression of a nascent rebellion. This was psychological warfare of the most brutal kind, designed to utterly shatter a people's will, to obliterate their pride and their very sense of self. But it did not break Boudica. Instead, it forged her. Rome, in its arrogant belief, thought it had crushed a minor tribal woman beneath its imperial boot. What it had actually done was awaken a lioness, a queen who would take her immeasurable pain and reshape it, temper it, into an unstoppable force of vengeance. A mother whose raw, incandescent rage would soon ignite entire cities, turning them into blazing pyres. A woman who would, in due course, remind even the seemingly invincible Roman Empire that even empires bleed. Word of the appalling atrocity, the rape and the flogging, spread like a wildfire through the disparate tribes of Britannia. Other tribal leaders listened, their faces hardening. They remembered their own humiliations at Roman hands, their own lands seized, their resources plundered, their own sons conscripted or killed in distant Roman campaigns. Rome, in its overconfidence, believed the tribes were hopelessly divided, scattered, and easily controlled. But in that singular moment of shared outrage and burgeoning fury, they found one thing, one galvanizing force, in common: Boudica's incandescent rage. What began with Rome's casual violation of one queen would soon cascade into a rebellion that would leave the empire reeling in genuine fear. They had broken a solemn treaty, shattered a family, and in doing so, irrevocably broken the illusion of Roman invincibility in Britannia. This wasn't merely a strategic mistake. It was the spark that would ignite one of the most ferocious and devastating revolts Rome had ever confronted on its vast frontiers. If Rome harbored any expectation that Boudica would simply fade into the shadows, a broken woman silenced by grief and shame, they profoundly misunderstood everything about her very essence. Boudica was not born to obey, she was born to lead. Roman historians, notorious for their disdain for foreign adversaries and their reluctance to compliment those who defied them, grudgingly described her as tall, fiercely imposing, with a startling cascade of flaming red hair that tumbled down to her waist, and a voice that, when raised, could slice through the clamor of crowds like a blaring war horn. She wasn't just a queen by inherited blood. She was a living, breathing symbol of defiance, and now, undeniably, a grave threat to Roman authority. But before she became that colossal threat, she transformed into something far deeper, far more primal, a mother with absolutely nothing left to lose. Roman brutality had systematically attempted to erase her dignity, to extinguish her children's future, and to obliterate her people's ancient pride. But Boudica utterly refused to be a victim. She grasped, with a keen strategist's intuition, what Rome feared most wasn't a mere army. It was the horrifying specter of unity among the disparate, conquered tribes. And so, with a fierce, unwavering resolve, she began to forge it, one tribe at a time. Her first crucial alliance was with the Trinovantes. They, too, had once been a powerful and proud people before Rome systematically crushed them under a suffocating weight of exorbitant taxes, rapacious land seizures, and brutal slave labor. When Boudica spoke to them, she didn't speak like a cautious diplomat or a political emissary. She spoke with the raw, guttural voice of a warrior mother, scarred but utterly unbroken, her spirit burning brighter than ever. She reminded them of their valiant ancestors, of their ancient gods whose reverence had been desecrated, and of the sacred earth that they no longer truly owned. Her pain, she asserted, was their pain, her righteous rage, theirs too. Slowly, cautiously at first, then with increasing conviction, the other tribes began to listen. The Karel Talvi, the Koranovi, even some factions of the fiercely independent Brigantes began to lend an ear to her impassioned pleas. Her cause was no longer merely about personal vengeance. It swiftly transformed into a holy mission, a divine mandate to cleanse Britannia of Roman arrogance and desecration. She offered no easy promises of safety or comfort. Instead, she promised glory in battle and an honorable death if it came to that, a far more compelling prospect than a life of subjugation. And they followed her, because she did not stand behind her warriors, issuing commands from a safe distance. She rode fiercely among them, a spear gripped firmly in her hand, her infamous red hair streaming loose to the wind, her eyes locked on a future free from Roman chains. She called out the names of the raped, the enslaved, the executed, transforming their suffering into a battle cry. She summoned ancient Celtic gods, like Andraste, the formidable Celtic war goddess, as her personal witness, and her warriors, fueled by desperation and renewed faith, truly believed her when she declared that the gods themselves would fight alongside them. She possessed no formal military training, no dusty scrolls detailing Roman strategy or tactics, but she had something far deadlier, a righteous fury, honed to a razor-sharp edge by profound betrayal, and guided by an unshakable sense of divine purpose. The very land itself, it seemed, began to shift and hum under her commanding presence. This was not merely a rebellion, it was a resurrection. The Queen Rome thought it had thoroughly broken was now the terrifying spearhead of a movement that would soon make the entire empire tremble. And she was, to their mounting horror, just getting started. The Roman eagle had long soared, unchallenged and majestic, over the vast, green expanses of Britannia. But now, the very winds beneath its mighty wings were changing, shifting ominously. Boudicca's fury wasn't a mere wildfire, quickly ignited and easily extinguished. It was a storm, gathering strength and building with a terrifying, inexorable purpose. And storms, like all destructive forces, need fuel. That fuel came from the thousands of Britons who had waited for years, generations even, for someone, anyone, to finally defy the arrogant empire. Someone to speak not in the precise, cold Latin of their oppressors, but in the visceral language of blood and iron. She gave them that voice. It began with clandestine war councils held under the ancient boughs of sacred groves, beneath the eerie glow of moonlit hills. Boudica didn't sit on a regal throne, nor did she recline in luxurious Roman fashion. She stood in the dirt, among her people, listening intently to the simmering anger of the tribal elders, to the profound sorrow of mothers who had lost their children, and to the chilling chants of the Druids who saw dark omens of war etched in the night sky. They all spoke of one undeniable truth: Rome had pushed too far. Now, it was time to push back, with every ounce of their collective might. Warriors from the Trinovantes brought their honed spears, their deadly slings, and their ancient, guttural battle chants. The Iceni, Boudicca's own people, added their formidable cavalry, swift riders with wild, flowing hair and fearsome war paint, utterly fierce and seemingly fearless in battle. Other tribes swelled the ranks with their own weapons, heavy axes, keen blades, and crackling torches, symbols of the destruction to come. Even women, inspired by their indomitable queen, bravely took up arms, ready to fight alongside their men. This wasn't merely an army forming. It was a profound resurrection of Celtic identity, a fierce reassertion of a culture that Rome had tried to erase. But Rome had its highly trained legions, professional soldiers, meticulously armored, disciplined with ruthless efficiency, and lethally effective. Boudica had to compensate for this superior training and equipment with sheer numbers, an intimate, unmatched knowledge of the treacherous British landscape, and something Rome could never teach its soldiers, a burning hatred forged in years of relentless humiliation. Soon, Boudica's army swelled to tens of thousands, a vast, surging tide of humanity. Farmers, hardened by labor, became ruthless warriors. Hunters, skilled in tracking and ambush, transformed into deadly assassins. Former Roman slaves and mistreated tribal allies, who had once served Rome, eagerly switched sides, abandoning their oppressors to join the cause of liberation. These weren't soldiers who fought for meager pay or imperial glory. They fought for memory, for vengeance, and for the fundamental right to raise their children without the heavy burden of Roman chains. She delivered a speech, her first of many, a fiery oration that Roman historians would later begrudgingly record, albeit with their inherent biases. But what echoes through the millennia is clear: she vowed to win or die. There would be no surrender, no submission, no turning back, no possibility of retreat. Then came the first target, Camulodunum. Once a significant British stronghold, it had been transformed into a gleaming Roman colony, littered with ostentatious temples, arrogant statues, and lavish villas that mocked the conquered landscape. The colossal temple of Claudius stood as a particularly egregious insult, a towering shrine dedicated to the very emperor who had subjugated them. To Boudica and her warriors, it was not sacred. It was a deliberate provocation, a monument to their enslavement, and it would be the first to fall. The tribes were no longer merely whispering rebellion. They were marching toward it, armed with a fury that had simmered for decades, and led by a queen who absolutely refused to kneel. Camulodunum never stood a chance. The once proud Roman colony of Camulodunum, envisioned as a shining jewel of Romanitas in Britannia, had become the ultimate symbol of everything Boudica's people despised. Its newly paved streets, built with forced labor, echoed not with ancient tribal chants, but with the crisp, authoritative commands of Latin. Its imposing buildings, temples, and villas rose atop sacred ground that had been violently expropriated, and towering over it all was the colossal Temple of Claudius, a marble mockery of British suffering, constructed with the very sweat and toil of the subjugated, praising the emperor who had enslaved them. To Rome, it was a monument to civilization and conquest. To Boudica, it was an unholy target. She gave the order. What followed was not a meticulously planned siege, a strategic military maneuver. It was an execution. Her army, a tidal wave of unleashed fury, descended upon the city. The Roman settlers, many of them veteran soldiers who had openly bullied, extorted, and heavily taxed the local tribes, were caught utterly off guard, complacent in their perceived security. The city had no proper defensive walls. Its few Roman soldiers and militia, expecting peace, not war, were poorly prepared, ill-equipped, and completely outnumbered. They desperately tried to hold the temple, barricading themselves inside, believing its sturdy walls could endure a siege. It did not. Within 2 agonizing days, Boudica's overwhelming forces breached the temple's defenses. The streets, once bustling with Roman trade, now literally ran red with blood. Her warriors spared no one, unleashing the full force of their pent-up rage. Men, women, and even children were ruthlessly slaughtered. Boudica's war wasn't merely military. It was profoundly personal, a reckoning for the unspeakable indignities inflicted upon her and her daughters. Her warriors systematically destroyed Roman statues, burned villas to their foundations, and turned their visceral rage onto the very symbols of the hated occupation. The Temple of Claudius, the ultimate insult, was set ablaze, its massive roof collapsing in a fiery inferno that lit the British sky for miles, a beacon of savage retribution. Survivors were rare, and those few who did escape carried horrific tales that chilled Roman blood across the empire, narratives of a brutality that defied Roman understanding. The fury, however, wasn't random or senseless. It was deliberate, precise, and born of generations of oppression. These were people who had seen their ancestral homes taken, their gods mocked, their daughters sold into slavery, their very identity challenged. Now, they were reclaiming what had been stolen, and they were doing so with compound interest. Roman officials in Britannia, gripped by panic, sent urgent pleas for help to Governor Suetonius, who was, maddeningly, hundreds of miles away in distant Wales, preoccupied with suppressing another, far smaller, rebellion. But by the time news of Camulodunum's cataclysmic fall reached him, the city was already reduced to ash and smoke, a prosperous colony utterly destroyed, its citizens dead, and the flame of rebellion rising higher, fiercer than ever before. Boudica didn't linger to celebrate. There was no time for such indulgences. She knew, with chilling certainty, that Rome's response would be swift, overwhelming, and utterly brutal. So she pressed on, knowing that each successive victory bought her precious momentum, a swelling tide of recruits and belief. Her next destination was a city even larger, richer, and far more vulnerable than Camulodunum, Londinium. If Rome hadn't taken her seriously before, they would most certainly now. Camulodunum was merely the beginning. But it wouldn't be true revenge. Not yet. Not until the empire's beating heart in Britannia felt the searing, cleansing fire of her vengeance. Londinium was the undisputed jewel of Roman Britannia, a burgeoning metropolis of ambition and commerce. Founded a mere 17 years prior, it had rapidly blossomed into a thriving hub of trade and administration, a testament to Roman efficiency and enterprise. Merchants from across the vast empire filled its bustling markets. There wears a kaleidoscope of goods and cultures. Imperial officials conducted Rome's intricate business under tiled roofs, their decrees shaping the destiny of the province. Wealth flowed through its streets like an unstoppable river, promising prosperity and security. But as Boudica's formidable army marched ever closer, that very wealth turned into a paralyzing panic. Governor Suetonius, having raced back from Wales with only a small, exhausted force, arrived just ahead of the advancing rebellion. He surveyed Londinium, sprawling, densely crowded, and utterly defenseless against an assault of this magnitude, and made a brutal, agonizing decision. He abandoned it. The bulk of the Roman legions, stationed elsewhere in the province, were simply too far away to offer timely aid. Suetonius, a pragmatic and ruthless commander, couldn't risk his limited, invaluable troops in a city that could not possibly be defended. So, with a heavy heart but steely resolve, he withdrew, taking with him those citizens who were able to flee, those with horses, strength, or connections. He left behind the old, the sick, the stubborn, and crucially, those too slow or too arrogant to believe that a woman-led, barbarian army could bring down the mighty edifice of Rome. They would, to their horror, learn otherwise. Boudica's forces swept into Londinium like a thunderclap, an unstoppable force of nature. There were no walls to scale, no fortified gates to breach. The city was wide open, and she made it bleed. Her warriors tore through the streets with the distilled rage of generations, a primal scream of vengeance against their oppressors. They didn't come to loot. They didn't come to occupy. They came to eradicate. The killing was systematic, precise in its brutality. Roman citizens were dragged from their homes, entire families butchered without mercy. Some were impaled, a gruesome warning. Others were burned alive in their own temples, the symbols of their faith consumed by the same fires that engulfed their lives. No quarter was given, and no Roman symbol, however grand or humble, was spared. Lavish villas were torched, their contents reduced to ash. Warehouses, overflowing with goods, exploded into flame, sending plumes of thick, black smoke miles into the British sky, a grim monument to Roman downfall. This wasn't merely a slaughter, it was a deliberate, undeniable statement, etched in blood and fire. Rome is not invincible. Contemporary Roman sources, like the sober historian Tacitus and the more sensational Cassius Dio, estimated that tens of thousands died in the conflagration of Londinium. Some accounts grimly suggested that the brutality here exceeded even what had occurred at Camulodunum. To the Roman mind, accustomed to conquest and order, this was not just a rebellion, it was an apocalypse. And through it all rode Boudica herself. She did not hide behind her commanders. She led from the front, in her war chariot, flanked by her 2 daughters, a defiant, terrifying matriarchal image. She watched as the empire's pride, its carefully constructed sense of superiority, crumbled beneath her feet. This wasn't senseless violence in her eyes. To her, it was absolute justice for what Rome had done to her family, her people, her sacred land. And she wasn't finished, because ahead of her stood another Roman center, Verulamium. And beyond that, she knew, lay the full, terrifying might of Rome's inevitable retaliation. Rome had faced countless rebellions before. It had fought and conquered wars across continents, subdued fierce tribes from the deserts of Africa to the dense forests of Germania. But it had never, ever seen anything quite like Boudica. She wasn't a general trained in the intricate tactics of Roman warfare. She didn't speak Latin, the language of command and conquest. She wore no polished, gleaming armor, only the symbols of her tribe and her unyielding resolve. Yet, in a breathtaking display of raw power, she had burned 2 major Roman cities to the ground and butchered tens of thousands of citizens and soldiers alike. And now, as Verulamium, a prosperous and thoroughly Romanized town northwest of Londinium, went up in agonizing flames, the very heart of the empire began to panic. Word of her unprecedented rampage, of cities ablaze and legions routed, had reached the hallowed halls of the Roman Senate. Emperor Nero himself, notorious for his extravagant tastes and often detached governance, reportedly considered the drastic step of withdrawing entirely from Britannia. Imagine that, an empire that spanned from the scorching deserts of Africa to the snow-capped mountains of Germania, contemplating a full-scale retreat from an entire province, all because of one woman, leading with a chariot and an unshakable cause. That is how profoundly she terrified them. In truth, Boudica's power wasn't solely in the overwhelming numbers of her army, or even their ferocious, unbridled courage. It was in what she represented. Rome saw itself as unshakable, its cities as eternal bastions of civilization, its rule as an immutable destiny. But here was a Celtic queen, once publicly beaten and humiliated, now leading a revolt that had reduced entire Roman settlements, symbols of imperial might, to smoking ash. Every new city she burned wasn't just a tactical victory. It was a devastating psychological blow, chipping away at the very foundation of Roman confidence and invincibility. Verulamium met the exact same fate as Camulodunum and Londinium. It was rich, thoroughly Romanized, and crucially, completely unfortified, its inhabitants complacently believing in Roman protection. Boudica's warriors slaughtered the inhabitants, systematically destroyed Roman temples, and leveled the sophisticated infrastructure. Archaeological evidence today still reveals a thick, unmistakable layer of ash beneath the modern town, a testament to a fire that raged with such intensity it left an enduring scar in the very earth itself. But here was the ultimate paradox, one that Rome struggled to comprehend. The war machine, born of righteous fury and fueled by initial, staggering victories, had begun to falter under its own weight. With each triumph, Boudica's host swelled to unprecedented numbers, becoming an immense, unwieldy force. But this growth was a double-edged sword. Supply lines, already strained, thinned to breaking point, leaving warriors hungry and ill-equipped. Organization, never a Roman strong suit among the disparate tribes, faltered with each hard-won victory. Boudica's war machine, though formidable, grew increasingly cumbersome. Her army swelled to an unprecedented size, a vast, unwieldy tide of warriors, but the very expanse of its numbers stretched vital supply lines thin, often to breaking point. Organization, once a nascent strength, began to falter under the sheer weight of its own success. Intoxicated by their astonishing triumphs, some tribal factions grew careless, their discipline eroding with each looted Roman town. Meanwhile, Rome, a power renowned for its indomitable resilience, was not merely licking its wounds. It was regrouping with cold, methodical precision. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, far from idle, was a man of steel and strategy. He had retreated, yes, but retreat for him was a tactical maneuver, never an act of surrender. With grim determination, he began to gather reinforcements, pulling battle-hardened legions from the furthest reaches of the province, calling upon every available resource. He meticulously sought the most advantageous high ground, studying every contour of the terrain, every potential choke point, preparing for one decisive, apocalyptic battle. Yet, even as Roman strength steadily rebuilt, a palpable, lingering fear gnawed at the heart of every soldier. Could they truly stop her? Because Boudica wasn't just waging war. She was a force of nature, rewriting the very narrative of conquest with blood and fire. City after burning city, she proved Rome could bleed, that empires were not invincible, and that queens, especially wronged ones, could strike back with terrifying vengeance. The final confrontation was hurtling towards them, and the entire empire held its breath. The fire she had ignited had spread as far as it could. Now, the storm itself had to face the unyielding might of steel. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus had chosen his battlefield with each crushing victory. Boudica's war machine, once a nimble instrument of vengeance, grew heavier, bloated by its own success. Her army swelled to an unwieldy mass, a surging tide of tribal warriors and eager volunteers. Yet this very growth became a burden, stretching already fragile supply lines to breaking point, leaving warriors hungry and restless. Organization, once fueled by immediate grievance and shared fury, faltered, replaced by a chaotic enthusiasm. Drunk with the spoils of war and the taste of Roman blood, some tribes grew careless, their discipline eroding with each looted town. Meanwhile, Rome, the indomitable empire known for its resilience, was not idle. It was regrouping, a wounded beast slowly recovering its terrifying strength. Governor Suetonius, a veteran of countless brutal campaigns, was no fool. His retreat was not surrender but a calculated withdrawal, a strategic repositioning. With grim determination, he began gathering reinforcements, pulling battle-hardened legions from across the vast province, each man a testament to Roman discipline. He sought the high ground, meticulously studying the terrain, not in despair, but with the cold resolve of a man preparing for one decisive, apocalyptic battle. Still, even as Rome might rebuild itself, a lingering, primal fear gnawed at every soldier's heart. Could they truly stop her? Because Boudica wasn't merely waging war. She was savagely rewriting the very story of conquest, proving with each city set ablaze that Rome, the seemingly invincible, could bleed, and that queens, especially wronged ones, could strike back with devastating force. The final, earth-shattering confrontation was coming, and the empire collectively held its breath. The fire of rebellion had spread as far as it possibly could. Now, the storm of Celtic fury had to face the unyielding steel of Rome. Governor Gaius Suetonius Paulinus had chosen his battlefield with meticulous, cold precision. He was not just any Roman officer. He was a survivor, forged in the fires of empire. While Boudica's warriors reveled in their destructive victories, Suetonius was calculating, mapping out their inevitable downfall. He selected a narrow defile, a constricted passage bordered by dense forest and steep hills, a choke point where Boudica's overwhelming numerical advantage would count for little, her vast hordes rendered impotent by the terrain. His own army was comparatively small, perhaps 10,000 strong, but every man was a disciplined killer, a living weapon forged in the rigorous, unyielding crucible of the legions. Boudica's force, on the other hand, was immense, a human tsunami. Some historical sources claim up to 200,000 warriors marched under her flaming banner. But they weren't soldiers in the Roman sense. They were farmers, blacksmiths, tribal chiefs, and freedom seekers, their hearts aflame with righteous anger. Inspired by their queen but wildly undisciplined, armed with raw fury, but lacking any semblance of Roman formation or coordinated strategy, they believed their sheer numbers would crush Rome like an unstoppable tide. They were tragically mistaken. As Boudicca's massive army approached the chosen killing ground, she delivered one last, impassioned speech. Standing atop her war chariot, its spiked wheels already stained with Roman blood, flanked by her daughters, she reminded them of their profound suffering, of the savage floggings, the rapes of their kin, the theft of their ancestral lands, the burning of their homes. She called upon the fierce goddess Andraste, invoked the spirits of their ancestors, and vowed either absolute victory or honorable death. Her warriors, a sea of defiant faces, roared their guttural response, their belief absolute that the gods themselves would carry them to triumph. Then, the battle began. The Britons charged, a primal, roaring wave that filled the confined field, driven by a fury born of centuries of subjugation. But Suetonius held firm, his legions a stoic, unmoving wall of iron. He let them come close, allowing the momentum of their charge to pack them tighter and tighter into the narrow terrain, a trap of their own making. Then, with timing honed by decades of war, he unleashed the Roman counterstrike. Spears flew in tight, deadly volleys, shields locked into an impenetrable barrier, and the gladii, the short, stabbing Roman swords, became a brutal extension of their will, cutting deep into the confused, unorganized mass of Britons. Wave after wave of Celtic warriors crashed into that iron wall, and each time, they broke, their momentum bleeding away into the earth. Then, the Romans advanced, step by relentless step, disciplined, precise, and utterly merciless. Behind the British vanguard, the vast train of wagons and families, who had followed the army expecting to witness another glorious Roman defeat, suddenly became a fatal obstacle. Trapped by the advancing legions and unable to retreat through their own civilian encampment, panic surged through the British ranks. The narrow battlefield, intended to be a stage for victory, transformed into a hellish slaughter. When the dust, mixed with blood and the ashes of hope, finally settled, it was over. Tens of thousands of Britons lay dead, their dreams of freedom extinguished. The rebellion was shattered, its fiery spirit broken. The empire had bent under the storm, but it had not broken. Boudicca had thrown everything she possessed at Rome, and though she lost the battle, the memory of her defiant stand would echo louder, more enduringly, than the clash of any swords. Her final fate would remain shrouded in mystery, but her legend was already immortal. The battlefield, once a cacophony of war, fell silent, the roars of battle replaced by the chilling moans of the dying. Boudicca had lost not just a battle, but the entire war she had set ablaze with her own hands. The ground was soaked with the blood of her people, and the ashes of their shattered dreams drifted into the cold, indifferent Britannic air. And Boudicca, the warrior queen who had made an empire tremble, was nowhere to be found. There are no definitive eyewitness accounts of her final breath, no clear, undisputed details of her death. Roman historians, despite their chronicling, offer conflicting stories, hinting at uncertainty. Some suggest she took poison, choosing a swift, defiant death over the ignominy of capture and public humiliation. Others propose she simply fell ill and died quietly in the chaotic, bloody aftermath of the battle. But what they all agree on is this: she vanished. No chained queen was ever paraded through the triumphal streets of Rome. No public execution, no final, satisfying humiliation for the empire. She simply disappeared, fading away like a storm that had burned itself out, leaving only devastation in its wake. Yet, in that very disappearance, something extraordinary and transformative happened. She became more than a queen. She became myth. Rome, deeply shaken and profoundly humiliated by the scale and ferocity of her rebellion, desperately tried to bury her memory, to erase her from the annals of their history. But it was too late. Boudicca had already become a name whispered in tribal songs, an echo reverberating through the sacred groves of Britannia. To the Britons, she was not a defeated rebel. She was a martyr, a fierce goddess of war and vengeance, a mother who had stood against the world's most powerful empire and made it bleed. Even among the Romans, there was a reluctant, grudging respect. Tacitus, Roman to the bone, painted her not as a mere barbarian, but as a formidable leader, a powerful queen wronged by the insatiable arrogance of empire. Cassius Dio wrote of her commanding presence and her terrifying, inspiring speeches. They feared her, yes, but they also admired her unyielding resolve. And across the centuries, Boudica refused to die. She would rise again, an enduring symbol of defiance, in Victorian statues, in the stirring poems of Tennyson, in countless history books, and in the lessons taught to generations of schoolchildren. She became a potent emblem of resistance, especially to women who saw in her story a fire that simply could not be extinguished. Her war chariot, its spiked wheels tearing across the fabric of time, transformed into a powerful vehicle of resistance, an icon of courage. And so, though her physical body may be forever lost to history, her voice never truly left. It rides with the wind, it screams in the fire, and it echoes through every soul that has ever stood against oppression and whispered, "I will not kneel." Centuries have passed since Boudica vanished into the mists of history, yet her shadow still lingers, long and defiant, across the British Isles. You can see her name carved into monuments, hear her invoked in impassioned political speeches, and feel her fierce presence in the stubborn, unyielding spirit of a land that never truly forgot her. In London, near Westminster Bridge, a magnificent bronze statue depicts her standing tall on her war chariot, flanked by her devoted daughters, their eyes set on the horizon, the wheels raised in an eternal gesture of defiance. Below her, the relentless hum of modern traffic and the oblivious chatter of tourists fill the air, unaware that they walk in the profound echoes of her monumental rebellion. But her legacy isn't just about statues or historical footnotes. It's about what she represents, a force greater than any single battle. Boudica became more than the sum of her fights. She became an eternal question, posed to every empire, every oppressor, every ruler who dares to forget the inherent power of the people. Asterisk what happens when the silenced rise. She was not perfect, for history rarely casts saints in its most pivotal roles. Her revolt was marked by horrific bloodshed and massacres. Tens of thousands died at the hands of her warriors. But history isn't written solely by saints. It's carved by those who dare to resist, and resistance, by its very nature, is rarely clean or antiseptic. Still, what makes Boudica endure, what ensures her immortality, is not merely her war against Rome. It is the fire she ignited in the human imagination, the image of a woman who lost absolutely everything and yet still stood tall, a queen who refused to be defined by the empire that tried to break her, a mother who channeled her profound grief into a sharpened sword of vengeance and liberation. Modern historians continue to debate her exact role, her tactical decisions, her deepest motives. But ask any Briton who Boudica was, and they won't recite academic footnotes. They'll tell you she was the queen who made Rome bleed, the formidable woman who united disparate tribes that had once warred with each other, the warrior who taught the world that dignity can rise, defiant and unbowed, even from the ashes of devastation. And in that, she becomes more than a historical figure. She becomes a blazing symbol of rebellion, of unyielding courage, of the unbreakable will to be free. Because even when Rome rebuilt its cities and redrew its maps, it could not erase her. Her flame still burns, fiercely incandescent, in every fight against tyranny, in every voice that dares to say no, and in every soul that would rather die on their feet than live on their knees. Boudica is gone, but her legend rides forever. To the ancients, illness was never a random occurrence, a mere twist of fate. It wasn't simply about bacteria, viruses, or rogue cells. Those biological explanations would only emerge thousands of years later. In the ancient world, Sickness was consistently perceived as a symptom, not of physical failure alone, but of a deeper, more profound disturbance, a disruption in a sacred balance, a fracture in the intricate harmony between body, mind, soul, and the natural world. In Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization, disease was often seen as divine punishment, a direct consequence of transgression. If someone fell ill, it was widely believed they had offended a powerful god, broken a sacred taboo, or attracted a malevolent curse. Diagnosis thus began not with a physical examination of symptoms, but with existential questions. What have you done? Who have you angered? Priests and healers worked in concert, interpreting ominous omens, casting protective spells, and prescribing elaborate rituals alongside their rudimentary herbal treatments. In ancient China, the concept of balance took on a more systematic and philosophical meaning through the interplay of yin and yang and the dynamic dance of the five elements. Health was understood as the state of perfect equilibrium between these opposing yet complementary forces. Too much heat or cold, dryness or moisture within the body would inevitably throw its delicate systems off balance. Practitioners of traditional Chinese medicine, TCM, didn't just treat a cough in isolation. They inquired deeply into its origins. When did it start? What time of day did it worsen? What emotions accompanied its onset? Healing was profoundly holistic, employing a vast toolkit of herbs, acupuncture, and precise dietary changes, all aimed at rebalancing the individual's inner cosmos. In Greece, the visionary physician Hippocrates, often hailed as the father of Western medicine, boldly rejected the prevailing idea of gods punishing people with disease. Yet, he too saw health as a manifestation of harmony. His theory of the four humors, blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile, would dominate Western medical thought for centuries. Each humor was linked to a specific temperament and a corresponding element. An excess or deficiency of any one humor would cause both distinct physical symptoms and observable personality shifts. A melancholic person, for instance, was believed to suffer from an excess of black bile, leading to their pensive disposition. Across these diverse ancient cultures, one unifying thread remained constant. Health meant wholeness. It was not merely the absence of pain or sickness, but the vibrant presence of profound balance. Whether it was the Ayurvedic concept of doshas in India or the belief in spiritual possession and ancestral influence in African healing traditions, ancient peoples understood that the human being was not an isolated entity. We were an integral part of nature, and nature, when disturbed or disrespected, would inevitably push back. So, when ancient healers laid hands on the sick, they weren't just searching for physical signs. They were listening for imbalance, attuned to the subtle disharmonies. And they firmly believed that to truly heal someone, you had to treat the invisible forces of spirit and balance just as carefully and meticulously as the visible wounds and ailments. In the mystical land of pyramids and pharaohs, medicine was a potent blend of both emerging science and profound sorcery. Ancient Egyptian healers, known as SW&W, were not merely physicians in the modern sense. They were sacred intermediaries, bridging the gap between the suffering body and the powerful divine. Their medical practices, surprisingly advanced for their era, were nonetheless deeply intertwined with ritual, magic, and an unwavering reverence for the gods. To the Egyptians, the body could bleed, bruise, and break, but its ailments were never purely physical manifestations. The spirit, the influence of the gods, and even the journey into the afterlife all played a crucial, interconnected role in every sickness. Much of what we know today comes from remarkable medical texts like the Ebers Papyrus, a vast ancient scroll dated around 1550 BCE. This invaluable document contains hundreds of remedies for everything from persistent toothaches and digestive complaints to complex tumors and surgical procedures. Egyptian doctors performed intricate surgeries, expertly set fractures, treated debilitating infections, and drained painful abscesses, often using sophisticated copper tools that they sterilized with fire. a remarkably advanced concept for their time. They possessed the knowledge to meticulously check pulses, to observe and analyze urine and feces for diagnostic clues, and to utilize a wide variety of potent herbs, many of which are still in medicinal use today. Yet, no significant treatment ever began without first seeking the blessing of the gods. Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, was believed to have gifted humanity the sacred secrets of healing. Sekhmet, the fierce, lion-headed goddess of war and plague, was both profoundly feared and ardently prayed to, for she possessed the power to unleash devastating epidemics or to grant miraculous recovery. Spells, potent incantations, were often recited over a patient as herbs were applied. Words, to the Egyptians, held immense power. These incantations weren't empty phrases, but were considered medicine in sound form, vibrational remedies to realign the spirit. Among their greatest and most versatile tools was honey. It was extensively used as a powerful antiseptic and wound dressing millennia before the existence of bacteria was even conceived. Wounds were carefully bandaged with it, sometimes combined with tree resin or lint for added protection. Garlic and onions were routinely prescribed for heart health and to ward off illness. Castor oil served as a potent laxative. Even moldy bread was pressed into infected wounds, a primitive yet effective antibiotic, centuries ahead of its time, demonstrating an intuitive understanding of microbial action. Egyptian doctors treated not only commoners, but also the highest royalty, and their skills were renowned and respected across ancient borders. Neighboring civilizations would frequently seek out Egyptian physicians for particularly difficult or mysterious cases. In a way, they were early specialists. Some focused their expertise on the stomach, others on the intricate workings of the eyes, or even on profound spiritual afflictions. But in all their vast knowledge, there was no separation between the physical and the sacred. A fever might stem from the persistent mosquitoes of the Nile or from the malevolent influence of an angry ghost. Healing the body, therefore, meant pleasing the gods, purifying the soul, and meticulously restoring divine balance. To the ancient Egyptian, a healer's true, profound role wasn't just to cure the illness. It was to meticulously restore cosmic order itself. Long before the emergence of modern Western medicine, India was already writing its own intricate and profound story of healing, one that viewed the human body not as a mere machine, but as a microcosmic reflection of the vast, interconnected cosmos. This ancient system is known as Ayurveda, a Sanskrit word meaning the science of life. Rooted deeply in the Vedic tradition, Ayurveda is far more than just a medical practice. It is a comprehensive philosophy, a holistic way of living in profound harmony with nature, the changing seasons, and the eternal spirit. Central to Ayurvedic thought is the concept of three dashas, Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. Each dasha represents a unique combination of the five fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. Vata governs movement, overseeing everything from nerve impulses to the rhythm of breath. Pitta controls transformation, encompassing metabolic processes like digestion and nutrient absorption. Kapha manages structure and stability, manifesting in bone density and physical resilience. Everyone is born with a unique, inherent balance of these dashas, a constitutional blueprint known as their prakriti. Illness, according to Ayurveda, arises when this delicate balance is disturbed, often by poor diet, chronic stress, environmental factors, or an unharmonious lifestyle. Ayurvedic texts like the Charaka Samhita and Sushruta Samhita date back over 2,000 years. These detailed, encyclopedic manuals offer not just thousands of herbal remedies, but also profound guidance on complex surgery, obstetrics, psychology, and even the ethical conduct expected of physicians. Charaka, a master of internal medicine, emphasized prevention as the first and most crucial line of defense. Sushruta, meanwhile, is remembered as an astonishing pioneer of surgery, meticulously describing over 300 distinct surgical procedures and more than 120 specialized surgical instruments. many skillfully carved from wood or metal. One of his most astonishing techniques was rhinoplasty, the intricate reconstruction of a nose using a flap of skin from the patient's own cheek or forehead. This wasn't merely cosmetic. It was often used to restore the faces of individuals mutilated as punishment, performed thousands of years before Western medicine began to catch up. Sushruta had already set the stage for what would become modern reconstructive surgery. But Ayurveda's enduring strength lies in its profoundly holistic approach. Healing the body is seen as utterly inseparable from healing the mind and soul. Treatments encompass a wide array of practices, including herbal medicine, therapeutic yoga postures, intricate breathing exercises, *pranayama*, warming oil massages, *abhyanga*, and meditative fasting. Plants like turmeric, ashwagandha, neem, and tulsi weren't just food sources. They were revered as powerful medicine, purifiers, and protectors of the vital life force. An Ayurvedic healer might approach a fever not just with specific herbs, but by also adjusting your sleep schedule, meticulously examining your emotional health, and recommending practices to cleanse and strengthen your digestive fire or Agni. Ayurveda teaches a fundamental truth. You are not separate from nature. You are nature. And when you fall ill, it is nature's profound call for you to return to your inherent, essential balance. In ancient China, health was never merely about flesh and bone. It was about energy, the invisible yet vital life force known as qi, pronounced qi, which flowed dynamically through every living being. The key to wellness, therefore, was ensuring that qi moved freely, unimpeded by blockage or uncontrolled by excess. This foundational idea would profoundly shape one of the oldest continuous medical systems in the world, traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM. To truly understand illness, ancient Chinese physicians first had to understand nature itself. They observed with meticulous detail the rhythms of the seasons, the waxing and waning phases of the moon, the intuitive behavior of animals, and the majestic turning of the cosmos. From these profound patterns emerged two core principles, yin and yang, and the dynamic interrelationships of the five elements, wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Yin and yang represented the fundamental balance in all things. Yin was cool, dark, passive, internal, associated with feminine energy. Yang was hot, bright, active, external, associated with masculine energy. Every organ, every emotion, and every physiological function of the body was classified under these opposing yet complementary forces. Health, then, was understood as a dynamic, flowing balance between them. A fever wasn't just a rise in temperature. It was an excess of yang, a fiery imbalance. Fatigue might signal a depletion of yin, a lack of cool, nourishing energy. Diagnosis was a profound art, a subtle dance of observation and intuition. Physicians didn't rely on complex tools. They relied intensely on their senses. They meticulously examined the tongue for color, coating, and shape. They felt the pulse at multiple positions on the wrist, discerning its depth, rate, and quality. They listened to the subtle tone and timbre of the voice, and they asked deeply probing questions about dreams, emotional states, and bowel movements. Every minute detail offered invaluable insight into the delicate balance or imbalance of qi within the patient. To restore health, they turned to a vast and sophisticated toolkit. Acupuncture, the precise insertion of fine needles into specific points along the body's energetic meridians, was used to unblock stagnant qi and restore its harmonious flow. Moxibustion, the controlled burning of the mugwort herb near these same points, was employed to warm and stimulate circulation, driving out cold. Cupping, herbal formulas meticulously crafted from hundreds of natural ingredients. Qigong exercises combining movement and breath, and strict, personalized dietary adjustments all played vital roles in their therapeutic repertoire. The ancient text Huangdi Neijing, or the Yellow Emperor's Inner Canon, compiled around 2,000 years ago, remains the foundational scripture of TCM today. It didn't just list diseases. It explored their intricate causes, outlined prevention strategies, and emphasized a holistic lifestyle. It taught that emotions like anger, grief, and fear could profoundly disrupt specific organs, and that true healing required emotional balance as much as physical remedies. Chinese medicine never separated the individual person from the world around them. To truly treat the body, one must also treat the climate, nurture the soul, and address the unseen energy within. In every heartbeat, the ancients believed, Qi was speaking, and the healer's most vital task was to listen. In the hallowed temples of ancient Greece and the bustling forums of Rome, medicine began its slow, deliberate step away from the purely divine and into the burgeoning realm of reason and empirical observation. But even here, the human body was still perceived as a delicate, interconnected ecosystem, meticulously ruled by balance and inherent temperament. And at the very center of this worldview stood a comprehensive theory that would profoundly shape Western medicine for over 1,000 years: the doctrine of the four humors. Developed initially by the Greek physician Hippocrates and later expanded upon by influential Roman doctors like Galen, this theory proposed that the human body was governed by four primary fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Each humor corresponded to a fundamental element: air, water, fire, and earth, respectively, and to a specific temperament. A healthy person, it was believed, maintained these vital fluids in perfect balance, known as eucrasia. Illness, conversely, was simply the result of an imbalance, too much or too little of one humor, a state called dyscrasia. If someone was observed to be feverish and prone to aggressive outbursts, they might be diagnosed with an excess of yellow bile, indicative of a choleric imbalance. A sluggish, pale patient suffering from apathy could be experiencing an overload of phlegm, a humoral state linked to cold and moisture. Treatment, therefore, focused entirely on restoring this crucial equilibrium through methods like bloodletting, purging, specialized diets tailored to temperament, and therapeutic baths. But the Greeks, particularly under Hippocrates, didn't stop at merely analyzing bodily fluids. They also deeply believed in the profound healing power of meticulous observation and environmental factors. The Hippocratic Oath, still echoed in modern medical ethics, urged physicians to do no harm, to observe their patients with careful attention, and crucially, to treat the whole person, not just an isolated disease. Hippocrates advised his students to consider the seasons, the prevailing winds, the quality of the local water, and even the patient's emotional state, recognizing their intrinsic impact on health. Healing sanctuaries, known as Asclepions, named after Asclepius, the revered god of healing, dotted the Greek landscape. These were far more than mere hospitals. They were spiritual retreats where patients underwent rituals of purification, fasting, and intense prayer. At night, they slept in sacred dormitories, hoping to receive healing dreams, *encoemesis*, directly beneath statues of Asclepius. These dreams were then interpreted by temple priests to guide treatment, demonstrating a seamless integration of reason and religion. In Rome, medical practice evolved further with the ascent of Galen, a brilliant Greek physician who served gladiators and emperors alike. He performed pioneering dissections on animals, meticulously studying anatomy, wrote hundreds of influential medical texts, and helped standardize and disseminate humorism across the vast Roman Empire. Though some of his anatomical and physiological ideas, based on animal rather than human dissection, were later proven flawed, Galen's monumental influence endured for centuries, shaping medical thought well into the Renaissance. Greco-Roman medicine, for all its mystical origins and reliance on humoral theory, began pushing humanity toward a groundbreaking new idea: that the human body was a knowable system. Complex, yes, but ultimately understandable. And if understood correctly, it could be brought back into harmony not through the whims of gods alone, but through the combined forces of reason, ritual, and the careful, dedicated art of healing. Long before written texts and formal schools of medicine emerged, indigenous peoples around the world were healing their communities using a deeper, more intuitive kind of knowledge. one passed down not through books, but through sacred stories, profound visions, and hands-on, intimate experience with the natural world. For these diverse cultures, medicine was not merely a profession or a trade. It was a fundamental way of life, inextricably woven into daily rituals, seasonal rhythms, and sacred ceremonies that bound communities together. Among Native American tribes, healers were revered figures known as medicine men and women. Their role extended far beyond physical treatment. They were spiritual guides, the keepers of sacred stories, counselors, and living repositories of ancestral knowledge. Illness was invariably seen as a profound disruption in the person's intricate relationship with nature, with their tribe, with the spirit world, or with their own inner self. Healing, therefore, required much more than herbs. It demanded a holistic reconnection. Plants were absolutely central to this practice. From the Cherokee to the Lakota, each tribe held an encyclopedic knowledge of the land's flora. What root to chew for pain relief, what leaf to brew for fever, what bark to crush for wounds. Sacred plants like sage, cedar, sweetgrass, and tobacco were integral, used in cleansing, smudging rituals to purify both body and spirit. Yet, medicine was never just about the ingredient itself. It was equally about intention, solemn ceremony, and profound respect for the living world. Healers often worked in tandem with powerful spiritual forces, conducting sweat lodges for purification, vision quests for guidance, and rhythmic drumming circles to induce trance states. Illness could be caused by a breach in sacred taboos, spiritual possession by malevolent entities, or even soul loss, a harrowing condition where part of the individual's essence had fled due to severe trauma. In such cases, intricate rituals like soul retrieval were performed, calling the lost spirit back through chanting, dancing, or guided trance. The same deep reverence for nature and the spirit world is echoed in indigenous traditions across the globe. In the heart of the Amazon rainforest, shamans rely on powerful plant medicines like ayahuasca, a hallucinogenic brew used not for recreation but for deep healing insight. They believe the plants themselves are sentient teachers, revealing the root causes of suffering through profound visions and spiritual journeys. In Aboriginal Australia, bush medicine encompasses a vast array of herbs, sacred clays, and healing rituals passed down through the Dreamtime, the ancestral era that still guides indigenous identity and spiritual law. Healing here is about a dynamic balance between the body, the land, the ancestors, and the sacred songlines that map their world. These profound systems were never codified in written books. They lived, breathed, and thrived in the songs, dances, and landscapes of the people. To indigenous healers, modern medicine may boast its machines and laboratories, but the earth has always been the first pharmacy. And healing, in its deepest sense, is not about defeating disease. It's about remembering who we are, where we come from, and our place in the sacred web of life. Across every ancient civilization, regardless of their specific language, geographical location, or complex belief system, there was one profound constant: the unwavering conviction that true healing required far more than just herbs and surgical skill. It required spirit. Whether illness was perceived as divine punishment, a profound soul imbalance, or a breach with sacred, unseen forces, ancient peoples universally believed that genuine healing began, fundamentally, in the unseen world. And the doorway to that mystical, unseen world was always, inextricably, ritual. In Mesopotamia, long before the rise of formal medical professions, people instinctively turned to exorcists and priests to battle illness. Diseases were almost universally believed to be caused by malevolent spirits, angry demons, or offended gods. Clay tablets from this era reveal detailed healing rites where specific chants were whispered as medicinal poultices were applied. Special figurines, imbued with protective magic, were often buried beneath houses to ward off sickness and evil influences. Rituals were not separate from treatment. They were the treatment, a potent, integrated component. In ancient Egypt, no physician would dare to work without first invoking the gods. Before applying honey to a wound or meticulously bandaging a broken limb, the healer would often recite precise prayers to Thoth, the god of wisdom, or to Sekhmet, the lion-headed goddess of both healing and wrath. Illness was not merely a physical attack, it was a cosmic imbalance, a disruption in the divine order. Healing meant meticulously realigning the patient with Ma'at, the sacred principle of truth, order, and universal harmony. In many African traditions, powerful healers known as Ngangas or Sangomas employed rhythmic drumming, ecstatic dancing, and profound divination rituals to both diagnose and cure ailments. They spoke with revered ancestors, summoned benevolent spirits, and often entered deep, trance-like states to journey into the spiritual realm on behalf of their suffering patients. While herbs and natural remedies were undoubtedly important, the unseen world was always consulted first, for it held the ultimate keys to understanding and recovery. Even in classical Greece, the cradle of Western rational thought, ritual played a vital and integrated role in medicine. In the Asclepiad, the sacred healing temples dedicated to Asclepius, patients underwent elaborate rituals of purification, fasting, and fervent prayer. At night, they slept in specialized dormitories for encoemesis, dreaming beneath statues of Asclepius, hoping to receive divine guidance or a miraculous cure in their sleep. These dreams were then meticulously interpreted by temple priests, who used the visions to guide the course of treatment. Ritual, in these ancient contexts, was never mere superstition. It was a profound, practical technology, a tangible means to engage with the spiritual dimensions that were believed to govern health and disease, completing the intricate tapestry of ancient healing. It was the very essence of structure, a sacred architecture that not only contained, but also gave profound shape to suffering, offering a resonant language to pain, and imbuing the journey of illness with a potent, undeniable meaning. Through meticulously orchestrated symbolic acts, people found pathways to transform the crushing weight of fear into the buoyant lift of hope, the isolating grip of disease into the comforting embrace of connection, and the bewildering disarray of chaos into a reassuring sense of control. More than that, ritual served as a powerful, collective affirmation, a constant reminder that in their struggles, they were fundamentally not alone. Even in our hyper-rational modern age, science continues to grapple with phenomena like the placebo effect, the astonishing power of belief, and the measurable healing impact of intention. The ancients, however, required no empirical data, no randomized controlled trials. They already possessed an intuitive, profound understanding that transcended the purely physical. They knew, deep in their bones, that sometimes a word spoken with reverence, imbued with collective faith, could mend wounds far deeper than any blade could reach. For not all wounds are visible to the eye, and not all medicine is reducible to matter alone. When we envision ancient surgery, our minds often conjure images of rudimentary tools, trembling hands, and unimaginable, agonizing pain. Yet, the truth reveals a practice far more impressive, nuanced, and profoundly human than such simplistic notions suggest. Across the vast tapestry of the ancient world, surgery was performed with a surprising degree of precision and ingenuity. These pioneering healers operated without the benefits of modern anesthesia, diagnostic X-rays, or antiseptic agents. Their formidable arsenal, however, comprised exceptional skill, unflinching courage, and a remarkable understanding of the human body, meticulously earned through countless generations of painstaking observation, relentless trial and error, and often, the brutal exigencies of necessity itself. In ancient India, the monumental Sushruta Samhita, a text meticulously compiled over 2,000 years ago, stands as a testament to this advanced knowledge. It painstakingly detailed more than 300 distinct surgical procedures, complete with precise instructions and classifications. Its venerable author, Sushruta, is rightfully revered as the undisputed father of surgery. He meticulously described sophisticated techniques for excising tumors, expertly setting fractured bones, deftly repairing hernias, and even pioneering intricate methods for reconstructing noses, a truly astonishing early form of plastic surgery known as rhinoplasty. His surgical instruments, a collection of over 100 distinct tools, were not merely sharp. They were incredibly varied, elegantly designed, and rigorously categorized. Specialized forceps, meticulously crafted scalpels, delicate probes, and fine needles, many forged from robust iron or keen-edged stone. Sushruta placed immense emphasis on foundational principles like meticulous hygiene, thorough surgical preparation, and the critical importance of understanding anatomy, advocating for dissection as a primary learning tool. Though practical dissection was often limited to animals due to cultural taboos, his groundbreaking surgical wisdom radiated far beyond the Indian subcontinent, profoundly influencing both Islamic and Western medical practices for centuries to come. Ancient Egypt, a civilization renowned for its mastery of life and death, saw surgical knowledge seamlessly interwoven with ritualistic practice. Surviving papyrus texts, such as the Edwin Smith Papyrus, offer detailed insights into sophisticated procedures, including the precise stitching of wounds, the expert treatment of dislocated limbs, and the meticulous draining of abscesses. A wealth of surgical tools, crafted from materials like durable bronze knives, specialized bone saws, and cauterizing rods, have been unearthed from ancient tombs, attesting to their practical application. Most strikingly, the Egyptians even practiced trepanation, a daring procedure involving cutting a hole in the skull, primarily to relieve intracranial pressure or treat severe head injuries. Amazingly, a significant number of these trepan skulls bear undeniable signs of healing, a powerful indication that many patients not only survived the perilous operation but often lived for years afterward. Trepanning, surprisingly, was not confined to Egypt. In pre-Columbian Peru, archaeologists have uncovered hundreds of trepan skulls, many belonging to warriors who had sustained grievous head wounds in battle. The success rates in some regions were shockingly high, with over 80% of patients exhibiting bone regeneration, a testament to the skill of these early surgeons. It is believed that these practitioners employed ingenious methods for pain management, such as the use of cocoa leaves or fermented maize beer, alongside potent herbal antiseptics derived from their rich botanical knowledge. In the Greco-Roman world, the towering figure of Galen dramatically advanced surgical techniques through his assiduous study of injured gladiators and meticulous dissection of animals. His groundbreaking insights into the intricate nervous system and complex vascular pathways laid indispensable foundations for the study of anatomy for over a millennium. Roman military surgeons, renowned for their discipline and practicality, treated battlefield wounds with remarkable efficiency, employing specialized cautery clamps to stem blood flow and ligatures to tie off vessels. While surgery remained an inherently dangerous endeavor across all ancient cultures, it was also universally held in high esteem. It was the exclusive domain of those rare, brave individuals who dared to cut into life itself, driven by the profound hope of drawing health from the crucible of pain. These were not mere butchers. They were, in their profound dedication and skill, true artists of the blade. And though their understanding of the body was undeniably incomplete by modern standards, their enduring legacy lives on every single time a scalpel is raised in the noble pursuit of healing rather than harm. Today, we inhabit a world of dazzling technological prowess, sophisticated digital diagnostics, intricate robotic surgeries, and revolutionary genetic mapping. We can scan a human body in mere seconds and dispatch life-saving prescriptions across continents with a simple tap on a screen. And yet, in the quiet, often overlooked corners of modern medicine, the gentle whispers of the ancient world still echo with surprising clarity. One can readily discover the principles of Ayurveda subtly woven into yoga studios, find time-honored Chinese herbal formulas gracing the aisles of pharmacies, and witness indigenous smudging ceremonies reverently performed in hospitals to honor and integrate patients' spiritual traditions. Medical students across the globe still solemnly take a version of the Hippocratic Oath, pledging to do no harm, a profound ethical commitment that traces its lineage directly back to their Greco-Roman predecessors. In modern operating rooms, we wield precision tools whose design and function trace their elegant lineage back to Sushruta's ancient iron instruments. Fundamental concepts like holistic care, preventative medicine, and the inseparable mind-body connection, now recognized as indispensable cornerstones of integrative health, are deeply rooted in the timeless wisdom of ancient civilizations who perceived healing not as a mere mechanical task, but as a dynamic, sacred relationship. Even modern science, in its relentless pursuit of objective truth, has come full circle, increasingly confirming what the ancients instinctively believed. Research now unequivocally demonstrates that chronic stress, profound social isolation, and unresolved emotional trauma can demonstrably weaken the immune system, profoundly disrupt sleep patterns, and manifest as debilitating physical pain. Meditation, once exclusively regarded as a spiritual discipline, is now rigorously studied for its measurable positive effects on brain health and cognitive function. Forest bathing, a practice derived from ancient Shinto and indigenous nature-based traditions, is increasingly being prescribed by medical professionals as a powerful antidote for anxiety and stress. And the enigmatic placebo effect, that astonishing capacity for healing powered solely by belief, continues to perplex and humble researchers who, for generations, once dismissed it as mere psychological noise. It is perhaps all too easy to dismiss ancient medicine as antiquated, as mere superstition, quaint folklore, or primitive guesswork. But when we engage with it more closely, with open minds and discerning eyes, we unearth something truly profound. We discover a worldview that treated illness not simply as a broken machine in need of repair, but as a fundamental disruption in one's very being, a clear signal that something, somewhere, was profoundly out of harmony. And that ancient, profound idea still holds immense relevance today, because medicine, at its deepest level, isn't solely about physical treatment. It is about meaning, about the profound comfort of being heard and understood, about being seen as a whole, complex individual. The ancients understood this instinctively. Whether they employed sacred chants, acupuncture needles, potent herbal leaves, or the sharpest of blades, they grasped the essential truth that healing was, in its essence, a sacred act. Today, as we relentlessly push further into the dazzling frontiers of biotechnology, artificial intelligence, and hyper-personalized medicine, perhaps we are not truly leaving the ancient world behind. Perhaps, instead, we are circling back to it, armed with an array of new tools and unprecedented knowledge, but still carrying the same timeless human heart. A heart that, across all epochs, still longs desperately for balance, for wholeness, for a profound healing that encompasses not just the fragile body, but the enduring spirit as well. Her name, like a wisp of smoke or a half-remembered melody, drifts through the annals of history. Sappho, the luminous poetess from the sun-drenched island of Lesbos, was born sometime around 630 BCE. Her voice, once vibrant and compelling, stirred the hearts of rapt listeners beneath starlit Aegean skies, and her words, even in their tantalizing, fragmentary state, still echo across millennia with an almost unbearable longing. Unlike the towering, martial figures of ancient Greece, the grand warriors and formidable kings whose fame was forged in conquest, Sappho's renown sprang not from battlefields, but from the innermost chambers of human emotion. Her true domain was not the clash of spears, but the intricate landscape of the human soul. She wove verses saturated with the complexities of love and the sharp pangs of jealousy, the fleeting beauty of youth and the crushing weight of despair, the exuberant thrill of joy and the piercing ache of yearning. She possessed an unparalleled gift for capturing life's most fleeting, ephemeral moments. A shy glance, the sudden flush of a blush, the tender tremor of a hand, and holding them suspended in verse, like delicate pressed flowers, fragile in their essence yet eternally resonant. Astonishingly little is concretely known about her life. No authentic portraits endure, no personal diaries survive the ravages of time. What we possess are mere traces, a few lines painstakingly preserved by diligent ancient scholars, poignant quotes embedded within the works of other authors, and the tantalizing, fragmented ruins of papyrus scrolls, tragically lost to the relentless currents of history. And yet, despite their brokenness, these fragments shine with an undimmed brilliance. The revered Greek philosopher Plato, recognizing her singular genius, bestowed upon her the exalted title of the 10th Muse. Centuries later, an eclectic array of poets, translators, and dreamers would embark on an impassioned quest to find her, diligently piecing together the scattered remnants of her life and work like an unfinished, hauntingly beautiful song. Sappho was most likely born into an aristocratic family on Lesbos, an island nestled in the northeastern Aegean Sea. This was no backwater but a vibrant crucible of music and learning, where poetry was not an isolated art form but was intricately woven into the very fabric of social life. She may have had siblings, a daughter, and perhaps even formidable political enemies, though the surviving records remain frustratingly vague. She navigated periods of political exile and social unrest, enduring moments of profound silence interspersed with bursts of exhilarating song. Her world was one where the voices of most women were largely confined to the domestic sphere or stifled altogether. But Sappho, with an audacious grace, defied that silence. She stood apart, not through overt rebellion or political agitation, but through the sheer, unassailable power of her artistic beauty. She composed her verses in the Aeolic dialect, crafting short, intensely vivid lyrics explicitly designed to be sung to the delicate accompaniment of the lyre. Her distinctive style was intimate, overflowing with rich, sensuous imagery, as captured in her evocative lines. Evening star, you bring back all that the shining day has scattered. Words such as these, crafted with such exquisite care, outlived mighty empires. And then, as quietly as she first appeared in the historical record, she faded. Much of her monumental work is tragically lost, burned, buried, or simply dismissed by later, less appreciative eras. But what scant remnants survive prove one undeniable truth. Sappho needed no grandiose monuments. Her poems, imbued with her spirit, were her monument. And today, when we speak of passion in verse, of love articulated without shame, of a longing that defiantly transcends centuries, we are still whispering the hallowed name of Sappho. To truly understand Sappho, one must first immerse oneself in Lesbos, the island that gently cradled her extraordinary voice. Lesbos was far from a provincial backwater. In the bustling tapestry of the ancient Greek world, it flourished as a sophisticated hub of art, music, and philosophical inquiry. With its fertile valleys, ancient olive groves, and coastal winds redolent with the mingled scents of salt and blossoming flowers, Lesbos was both a physical paradise and a radiant cultural gem. It was not Athens, nor did it aspire to be. It possessed its own distinctive rhythm, slower, more sensual, and deeply steeped in a rich lyrical tradition. Here, music was not a mere decorative flourish. It was an act of profound devotion. The haunting melodies of the lyre and the clear tones of the aulos echoed through homes and sacred temples alike. Poetry was inherently sung, not simply read from a scroll. And in this vibrant, sonorous world, suffused with the rhythms of nature, Sappho's incomparable voice was born. She made her home in the city of Mytilene, the island's bustling, intellectual heart. Here, politics thrived with its intricate dance of factions and alliances, and so too did a vibrant, competitive artistic scene. Lesbos proudly boasted an impressive array of poets and philosophers. Sappho herself endured a period of exile, perhaps to distant Sicily, amidst the turbulent currents of political unrest. But it was always Lesbos that exerted an irresistible pull, drawing her back home. It was, in the truest sense, her eternal muse. Lesbos also fostered a unique and precious space for female community, a phenomenon exceedingly rare in the patriarchal ancient world. Aristocratic girls received a comprehensive education in music, poetry, and ritualistic practices. Many scholars believe that Sappho herself presided over a type of thyasos, a select circle or school where young women were initiated into the profound art of lyric poetry, the grace of dance, and the devotional worship of the goddess Aphrodite. This was not formal education in the modern sense, but rather a sacred, creative sisterhood, a vibrant sanctuary where powerful bonds, both emotional and intellectual, and very possibly romantic, were forged. Sappho's genius lay in her direct address to these women, not as abstract muses or idealized figures, but as tangible, breathing presences in her life. She spoke to them by name, mourned their departures with searing honesty, celebrated their beauty with fervent admiration, and confessed her love with an almost raw, unblushing candor. In one achingly tender fragment, she writes, "I have not had one word from her. I beg you, bring her back to me." These lines do not emanate from the grand narratives of myth or the staged artifices of theater. They spring from a palpably lived world, from a close-knit circle of women singing by lamplight, weaving the threads of their deepest emotions into the rich tapestry of song. And though later centuries would tragically distort her legacy, framing it with scandal or baseless speculation, Lesbos remained the fertile soil from which her truth undeniably grew, not merely a geographical location on a map, but a profound cultural cradle of passion, artistic innovation, and uninhibited female expression. Sappho did not simply reside on Lesbos. She transcended it, becoming, in essence, Lesbos itself, its very breath, its pulsating heart, its unforgettable voice. In an age dominated by the monumental epics of Homer, which lauded gods and heroes and men, where scrolls were filled with the clangor of battles and the glory of conquests, Sappho dared to write about the most intimate landscape of all, the human heart. She did not sing of war's grim spectacle. She sang of a trembling hand, a shy, fleeting glance, a voice so potent it made her very body shiver with desire. She stands as one of the very first poets in Western history to boldly write in the first-person singular, I, not merely narrating external events, but viscerally feeling them, inviting the reader into her subjective emotional world. And what she felt was the full spectrum of human experience: passionate love, aching longing, the bittersweet sting of jealousy, profound tenderness, and unbridled desire. Most astonishing of all, she wrote as a woman, to women, and profoundly about women. In ancient Greece, a woman's voice was typically confined to the domestic sphere or, more often, silenced entirely. Public life, the vast realm of literature, the intricate dance of politics, the lofty pursuit of philosophy, these belonged almost exclusively to men. But Sappho, with an audacious grace, stepped beyond those rigid walls, not with overt rebellion or political rhetoric, but with the undeniable power of rhythm and verse. Her poetry did not demand a space already allocated. It effortlessly created its own. It was a private, incandescent universe where emotion was not perceived as weakness, but as an undeniable source of power. And within that sacred space, she accomplished something truly radical. She bravely named the women she loved. She did not reduce them to abstract symbols or speak solely in veiled metaphors. She vividly remembered their laughter, the intoxicating scent of their perfumes, the intricate way they braided their hair, details that anchored her affection in a tangible, lived reality. In one iconic fragment, she describes the visceral sensation of seeing a beloved in conversation. He is equal to the gods, that man who sits beside you, who listens to your sweet voice and watches your lovely laughter. Oh, it makes my heart beat fast. Here, Sappho is the poignant onlooker, observing the woman she adores speaking intimately with another. Her jealousy is not loud or dramatic, but quiet, aching, and deeply, universally human. In just a few lines, she captures the full, bittersweet weight of unrequited love, a sensation every listener, then or now, can instinctively understand. Her words conveyed a profound eroticism, yet never descended into vulgarity. She rendered sensuality with the exquisite care of a master painter, evoking the elegant curve of a neck, the delicate softness of sleep, the ethereal way moonlight might touch bare skin. She refused to separate beauty from intimacy. For Sappho, they were inextricably intertwined. Because of this unapologetic honesty, later centuries frequently misunderstood or actively censored her. Some zealously attempted to erase her queerness entirely. Others tragically mythologized her heartbreak into a conventional, heterosexual tragedy. But none of these attempts could ever diminish the incandescent truth of her voice. A woman who wrote with unparalleled honesty, lyricism, and immense courage about love, not as an abstract philosophical concept, but as someone who had lived it deeply, openly, and without a trace of apology. Sappho didn't merely write poetry. She composed music for the very soul. Her verses were never intended for silent reading. In ancient Greece, poetry was a living, breathing art form. It was sound, it was breath, it was vibration made manifest. Sappho's chosen form was the lyric, concise and intensely personal, expressly meant to be performed with the gentle accompaniment of a lyre, a small, stringed instrument cradled in the lap, plucked delicately while her voice carried the words like a soft breeze across the Aegean Sea. This was the vibrant heart of lyric poetry, and it is from this practice that the very word lyrical derives its meaning. Her poetry was not epic. It did not recount lengthy tales of war and gods. Instead, it was intimate, profoundly emotional, and immediate. The lyric was a whispered secret, a heartfelt confession, a passionate love letter sung beneath the shade of fig trees or within the soft glow of candlelight rooms. And Sappho, without dispute, was its undisputed master. Her poems were meticulously crafted in Aeolic Greek, a regional dialect celebrated for its inherent softness and melodic rhythm. Her preferred meter, now universally known as the Sapphic stanza, flowed with a distinct and captivating beat. 3 longer lines elegantly followed by a shorter, punchy one, like a gentle sigh exhaled at the conclusion of a deeply longing thought. It was a subtle and exquisitely musical structure, reminiscent of the rhythmic rising and falling of breath during a quiet, intimate moment shared between lovers. She would have performed these enchanting songs surrounded by her circle of women, her students, her companions, perhaps even priestesses of Aphrodite. These gatherings, likely ritualistic or educational in their nature, also functioned as precious spaces of profound freedom, sanctuaries where emotion, song, and the physical body were not fragmented or compartmentalized, but experienced as a glorious, indivisible whole. Through these captivating performances, Sappho not only shared her compositions, but actively trained others in the intricate art of poetic composition, thereby creating not just individual poems, but an entire, vibrant culture of lyrical expression. We can only dream of what such an experience must have sounded like. The soft, resonant twang of the lyre's strings, the clear, ethereal rise of her voice, the profound stillness of listeners hanging on her every syllable. Many of her poems open not with declarative statements, but with evocative questions or solemn invocations, much like the gentle initiation of a conversation or the heartfelt sincerity of a prayer. Come to me now, O golden-throned Aphrodite, and free me from hard care. These were poems that reached outward to the divine pantheon of gods and inward to the deepest chambers of human desire, and yet they resonate with a surprisingly modern sensibility. One could easily set them to contemporary music today, and they would still stir something raw, real, and deeply human within any listener. Sappho profoundly transformed poetry into song. And in doing so, she unequivocally reminded the world that emotion itself is a form of music, that every heartache, every exquisite thrill of touch, every fragile tremble of a voice, deserves its own melody. And hers is a melody that continues to echo, undiminished, centuries later. For every precious line of Sappho's poetry we are fortunate enough to possess today, dozens, perhaps even hundreds, have been tragically lost to the unforgiving currents of time. What remains are mere fragments, exquisite shards of emotion and sound, isolated phrases brutally ripped from their original, vibrant songs, drifting precariously across time. Some are remarkably complete stanzas, offering a glimpse of her artistry. Others are mere whispers, a single, evocative word, a sliver of unfulfilled longing, a poignant closing thought devoid of its beginning. And yet, even these broken pieces pulse with an undeniable life, glowing like embers in the ash of something once brilliantly whole. Why did so much vanish? The reasons are multifaceted and tragic. The relentless attrition of time, the destructive chaos of war, and, most disturbingly, deliberate acts of destruction. Sappho's complete works were once meticulously collected into 9 volumes, lovingly housed and organized in the famed Library of Alexandria. These were, for a time, widely copied and passionately recited throughout the classical world. But with the catastrophic fall of that legendary library, an incalculable wealth of ancient literature was irrevocably lost. Later, as the influence of Christianity steadily rose and solidified, many works deemed pagan or immoral were systematically suppressed, negligently forgotten, or intentionally consigned to flames. Sappho's poetry, brimming with unrestrained passion and, critically, celebrating same-sex love, made her a prime target for this zealous erasure. By the medieval period, her vibrant legacy had faded almost entirely, leaving her a mere ghost in the collective memory. Her name survived, but her authentic voice was nearly silenced. It was only through the diligent efforts of other ancient authors, whose quotations from her work were preserved in grammars, commentaries, or philosophical treatises, that scattered bits of her poetry managed to escape complete extinction. These fragments were often cited for their stylistic elegance or unique vocabulary, rather than for their profound emotional force. Yet, despite this academic context, the raw feelings still bled through. Then came the astonishing discoveries of the papyri. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, archaeologists meticulously digging in the sun-baked sands of Oxyrhynchus, Egypt, uncovered thousands of fragile scraps of ancient manuscripts. Among them, miraculously, were torn and faded lines of Sappho, bits of songs that had not been seen, read, or heard for over 1,000 years. More thrilling discoveries continued to follow. In 2004, a nearly complete poem was unearthed on a papyrus scroll found wrapped around an ancient mummy in Germany. Each recovery felt nothing short of a resurrection, a miraculous return from oblivion. And yet, so much remains tantalizingly missing. We read her today in echoes, in mere glimpses. What we long for is not just the words she penned, but the full, rich tapestry of what she might have expressed if history had simply allowed her to speak without interruption. Still, there is something hauntingly fitting in this survival through fragments. Sappho herself often wrote about impermanence, about the exquisite beauty of fleeting moments, about a kind of beauty that slips through one's fingers like grains of sand. And so, perhaps it is profoundly appropriate that her poetry arrives to us not as a perfectly preserved monument, but as an enduring mystery, a delicate puzzle painstakingly pieced together by generations of lovers of language, of music, and of the human heart. Her voice, once threatened with being drowned in fire, still burns brightly. Sappho's poetry was too profoundly honest, too nakedly emotional, to escape the harsh judgment of later generations. In her own lifetime, she was not only admired but celebrated, widely recognized as an unparalleled master of lyric poetry. Plato, as noted, exalted her as the 10th muse, positioning her among the divine. Yet, as the centuries relentlessly passed and cultural values dramatically shifted, her legacy became twisted, actively silenced, or scandalized, depending on the prevailing ethos of the times. Why? Because she wrote about a kind of love, a deep, ardent affection and desire for women that history, particularly patriarchal history, found profoundly uncomfortable to remember or acknowledge. She praised their beauty with fervor, mourned their absence with open sorrow, confessed her jealousy with unblushing candor, and celebrated their intimacy with palpable delight. In her world, on Lesbos, such expressions of love were not considered strange or deviant. Within the specific cultural setting of aristocratic women, particularly, close emotional and potentially romantic bonds were accepted, even honored. But later generations, especially under the ascendant influence of Roman, Christian, and Victorian moral values, profoundly struggled with this. Rather than courageously confronting the truth of her experience, they systematically rewrote her story. Medieval scribes simply ignored her. Renaissance translators, eager to sanitize her for their own sensibilities, softened her vibrant language, subtly altering pronouns and contexts. Victorians, unable to reconcile her with their rigid norms, labeled her a tragic romantic, heartbroken over a man, going so far as to invent the baseless myth that she leapt to her death from a cliff over an unrequited love for a handsome ferryman named Phaon, a tale that appears nowhere, absolutely nowhere, in her authentic work. This fabricated story served a specific, insidious purpose: to erase her queerness, to make her pain more palatable, her desires more conventionally heterosexual. Some critics reduced her poetry to merely educational or platonic exercises, stripping it of its erotic and emotional depth. Others dismissed her altogether as indecent or morally objectionable. And yet, she persisted. Even amid scandal and suppression, Sappho's indomitable name survived. In the 19th century, when open discussion of same-sex love was still a profound taboo, her legacy quietly, almost subliminally, became a coded symbol for queer identity. The very words sapphic and lesbian became established terms for romantic love between women, rooted directly in her name and her island home. She became, without ever intending to, a powerful figure of resistance, a poetic ancestor to those whose loves were systematically silenced and erased. And still today, debates echo through academic halls and cultural discussions. Who was she, truly? A teacher, a lover, a myth, a threat? But perhaps the more incisive question is, why are we still so afraid of her truth? Sappho did not write to fit into pre-existing categories or conform to societal expectations. She wrote what she felt, purely and courageously. She named beauty, confessed longing, and lived her truth through verse. Her scandal, if it can be called that, wasn't in her actions, it was in her unflinching honesty. She dared to write desire, and for that, history tried to muffle her voice, but it never, truly, could. If there was one divine presence that truly hovered over Sappho's life and artistic work, permeating every line, it was unequivocally Aphrodite, the resplendent goddess of love, intoxicating beauty, and irresistible desire. To Sappho, Aphrodite was far more than a distant myth or an abstract deity. She was a vibrant muse, a trusted confidant, even a kind of intimate companion during moments of intense passion and profound heartbreak. Many of Sappho's most potent and enduring verses are not simply about love. They are direct, fervent prayers to Aphrodite, impassioned invocations, eloquent pleas, powerful arguments crafted in verse when the overwhelming weight of longing became almost unbearable. In her most famous surviving poem, the Ode to Aphrodite, Sappho does not merely praise the goddess from afar. She speaks to her with an astonishing directness, almost as if addressing a dear friend who has heard this particular pain countless times before. "Come to me now," she implores. "If ever you have answered my voice in the past, free me from hard care. Fulfill all that my heart longs to achieve." There is no trace of shame in this raw vulnerability, no hint of fear in expressing such fervent desire. Sappho's love is never portrayed as sinful or weak. Instead, it is depicted as divine, sacred enough to compel a goddess to descend from the celestial heavens. In the ancient world, Aphrodite's dominion extended far beyond conventional romance. She ruled over the primal forces of attraction, the intricate dance of seduction, the undeniable chemistry between bodies, and the sharp, aching pang of separation. To call upon her was to acknowledge that love, in its boundless power, could wound just as deeply as it could thrill. Sappho, with her unparalleled emotional honesty, captured that duality perfectly. She did not idealize love into a simplistic, rosy fantasy. She lived intimately within its complex contradictions. She wrote with equal intensity of its intoxicating sweetness and its piercing sting, its breathtaking beauty and its inherent, often cruel, unpredictability. In another vivid poem, she writes, "Love shook my soul like the wind on the mountain, troubling the oak trees." Here, love is not a gentle emotion. It is a violent, elemental force, something that tears through the very fabric of the self without seeking permission. By placing Aphrodite at the very epicenter of her emotional world, Sappho elevated human longing into something mythic, something cosmic. Her poems masterfully blurred the line between the intensely personal and the profoundly divine, between everyday human emotion and an irresistible, universal force. And in doing so, she helped to construct a powerful literary legacy where love was not merely a recurring theme, but a sacred form of worship itself. For Sappho, Aphrodite was not an abstract deity. She was a shimmering mirror, a formidable force that reflected back all the intensity, the exquisite confusion, and the undeniable beauty of the human heart. And in every single line of Sappho's timeless verse, the goddess of love listens and, indeed, replies. Like the luminous fragments of her poetry, Sappho's death remains a mystery shrouded in myth. No one knows precisely when she passed, how old she was, or even where she spent her final years. Some romantic accounts suggest she died peacefully on Lesbos, surrounded by the familiar embrace of the sea and the sweet melodies she so deeply cherished. Others, particularly later Roman poets and chroniclers, spun elaborate, tragic fables, claiming she dramatically leapt to her death from the stark, white cliffs of Lefkada, her heart shattered by an unrequited love for the handsome ferryman Phaon. However, there is no historical evidence whatsoever to support this sensationalized narrative. It appears to be a calculated invention, a deliberate contrivance by a male-dominated literary tradition designed to reframe her love and profound suffering into a more conventional, heterosexual tragedy. This myth effectively transformed the powerful, independent poetic voice of a woman who celebrated women into the victim of unreturned affection for a man. It offered a neat, tidy ending, perhaps, but an undeniably false one. The truth is likely far simpler and, arguably, more profound. Sappho, the luminous poetess, disappeared from the historical record as quietly and enigmatically as she arrived. Yet, after her passing, her extraordinary work endured for centuries. She was diligently studied by philosophers, frequently quoted by playwrights, and passionately sung in performances across the vast expanse of the ancient Greek world. Her poetry was meticulously preserved in 9 distinct books, a veritable treasure trove of lyric verse. For a significant period, her fame and influence rivaled even that of the legendary Homer. But history, regrettably, is often unkind to voices that boldly challenge its established norms. With the inexorable rise of the Roman Empire and, subsequently, the pervasive dominance of Christian moral codes, Sappho's openly emotional and deeply sensual poems, especially those fearlessly celebrating female love, steadily fell out of favor. Her writings were no longer recopied with the same diligence. Her precious volumes were left to decay in libraries that would eventually burn or crumble into dust. Some scholars strongly believe her works were intentionally destroyed by zealous early church officials who deemed her songs dangerous, morally corrupting, or pagan. By the bleakness of the Middle Ages, her name barely lingered, and her actual words were, for the most part, devastatingly gone. It would take over 1,000 years before fragile fragments of her verses began to resurface, painstakingly unearthed from ancient Egyptian trash heaps or discovered as casual quotations in obscure ancient grammars. Piece by painstaking piece, she was slowly, miraculously reborn, not through the creation of new myths, but through the sheer resilience of her survival. Her physical death may be lost to time, but her disappearance from human consciousness was never total. She lingered, an enduring presence in whispers, in stolen lines scribbled in margins, in the persistent ache of voices that resolutely refused to be forgotten. Sappho, the indelible poetess, did not require a heroic or tragic death. Her incandescent poems, brimming with eternal human truth, were already immortal. Even in the vast, silent expanses where her verses have been lost to time, we sense the profound imprint of her spirit. It is a presence that defies absence, a vibrant echo that reverberates across millennia. Though fragmented and incomplete, her legacy is not one of longing for what's missing, but an enduring testament to a spirit that yearned, that loved, and that, through its very vulnerability, became immortal. Her voice, though broken, resonates with the profound truth of human experience, a testament to a brilliance that could not be wholly extinguished. Sappho's historical biography remains largely shrouded in the mists of antiquity, a life story obscured by the ravages of time and the biases of subsequent eras. Her poetic canon, once voluminous, now survives as a collection of tantalizing fragments, scattered shards of unparalleled beauty. Yet, paradoxically, this very incompleteness seems to amplify her allure, making her a muse for collective imagination rather than dimming her radiant influence. Like a stubbornly defiant candle flame, buffeted by winds but refusing to be extinguished, her light has not only persisted but has, if anything, grown more luminous, casting an ever-widening glow across the centuries. Indeed, across every epoch of Western civilization, Sappho has experienced a profound reawakening, her voice discovered anew by those who sought profound truth and beauty. During the Renaissance, humanist scholars, digging through the debris of forgotten texts, reverently studied her surviving fragments. They marveled at her astonishing lyrical precision and her delicate, yet powerful, command over the most intricate human emotions, seeing in her work a purity that transcended the classical epics. Centuries later, in the passionate swells of the Romantic era, poets such as Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe, and in the haunting gaps where her words once lived, we can still discern the profound, ethereal shape of her spirit. It is a presence at once yearning and unfinished, yet undeniably potent, a testament to a voice that, despite its partial erasure, has never truly departed. Sappho's life may be largely lost to the deep mists of history, her verses scattered like petals on the wind, but her influence has never faded into obscurity. If anything, the enigma surrounding her has only amplified her power, causing her legacy to burn ever brighter, like a single, tenacious candle in the dark that flickers but resolutely refuses to be extinguished. This enduring flame has consistently drawn new generations to its warmth. Throughout the annals of time, someone, somewhere, has invariably rediscovered her. In the fervor of the Renaissance, humanists and scholars painstakingly pored over her precious fragments, marveling at her delicate yet absolute command of human emotion, recognizing in her the purest expression of lyrical beauty. She became a bridge to an idealized classical past, a muse for renewed artistic and intellectual endeavor. Centuries later, during the Romantic era, poets like Lord Byron and Percy Bysshe Shelley invoked her name not just as a classical allusion, but as a kindred spirit, a symbol of unbridled passion and a profound connection to the natural world. They saw in her an echo of their own intense introspection and revolutionary spirit, a voice that dared to sing of love and desire with an unvarnished honesty. As the 19th and 20th centuries dawned, and societal conversations around gender, identity, and sexuality began to ignite and reawaken, Sappho ascended to a new, powerful symbolic status. She became a beacon of queer resilience, a paramount figure of feminine artistry and intellectual prowess, and a fearless champion of emotional freedom. Her life, though shrouded, offered a potent historical precedent for love beyond conventional norms. Indeed, her name lives on, woven into the very fabric of language itself. The term sapphic, originally coined to describe her unique poetic style, now unequivocally denotes romantic love and desire between women. And lesbian, derived from Lesbos, the island of her birth and her artistic community, has blossomed into a global identity, a rallying cry, and a testament to collective experience. These words are far more than mere terms. They are vibrant echoes of her life, living proof that a voice, however ancient and fragmented, can ripple across millennia and profoundly reshape how we understand and articulate the deepest human experiences of love and expression. Artists, writers, and musicians across all disciplines continue to be irresistibly drawn to her timeless allure. Painters have vividly imagined her, perhaps seated at her lyre on moonlit lesbian shores, her face illuminated by the glow of inspiration. Poets, across cultures and languages, have tirelessly translated her again and again, each version a fervent quest to capture the elusive pulse and inherent music beneath her original words. Modern authors, songwriters, and playwrights have reimagined her, reclaimed her from historical obscurity, and resurrected her in novels, songs, and theatrical productions, ensuring her story remains vibrant and relevant. And through all these interpretations, rediscoveries, and artistic renditions, one core truth remains profoundly clear. Sappho speaks to something irrevocably universal within the human condition. It matters little that her surviving poems are broken fragments, or that the details of her biography are blurred by time and conjecture. What truly matters is the raw, potent emotion that burns with an undiminished intensity beneath every word. The trembling joy of desire, the poignant ache of separation, the sacred reverence for beauty in all its forms. These are not mere literary themes. They are fundamental feelings we all carry, deeply embedded in our shared humanity. She simply found a way to sing them, a way to give voice to the ineffable. Perhaps that, then, is her true, unassailable immortality. Not the stoic marble statues erected in her honor, nor the meticulous scholarly footnotes dissecting her verse, but rather the astonishing, intimate way a few lines penned over 2,600 years ago can still compel a modern soul to pause, to breathe deeply, and to feel profoundly less alone in their own complex tapestry of emotions. Sappho's extraordinary gift was never confined solely to poetry. It was an incandescent presence. She elevated mere feeling into an art form, transmuted longing into a resonant, undeniable truth. And in doing so, she transcended the singular role of a poet. She became a timeless mirror, reflecting the innermost selves of anyone who has ever loved quietly, deeply, passionately, or, indeed, in defiance of a world that might seek to diminish or deny their truth. And as long as human hearts continue to break, to heal, and to articulate their deepest experiences through the potent alchemy of language, Sappho will remain, not merely remembered as a historical figure, but viscerally felt as a living, breathing presence within the human spirit.